Online stores are closing everywhere. Nintendo shut down the 3DS and the Wii U eShops in late of March 2023. Many gamers freaked out when Sony first announced it was closing the PlayStation Store for PlayStation 3 and the Vita in 2021. But then they postponed the closure on the PlayStation 3 side of things at least. But we all know it's coming eventually. No digital store is safe. So I've decided to go through and play the entire catalog of games on the Xbox Live Arcade section of the store. But that's with an asterisk, you can see it right here. I am Striker of Enyo, and you are going to see me play every game that is still available on the service, along with many that have been delisted. Half of them I actually own. The other half will consist of playing the free trial. Some games have been removed from the storefront, and some don't have active servers anymore. But I'm going to play every one that I can get my hands on. I will play the trial, or if I own it, I will play it for a longer period of time. I will give you my thoughts, give it a tentative score, and let you know whether I think it's worth picking up before the store closes. We are going to run into a number of bad games, along with some franchises that I just don't understand. Some games are going to be decent, some are going to be fun, and some are going to piss me off.
In the next generation, Xbox 360 will transform the way people play games and have fun.
It's raining here in New York, but these gamers don't care. They've been out here in the rain since early this...
The Xbox 360 finally got out of your dreams and into your car.
So let's see what's possible when the most creative minds world of game development have access to the ideal canvas on which to express their vision.
In the next generation, video games will become an essential component of global pop culture.
What happens next is up to you.
Please think of this as a fun little romp down memory lane for the XBLA service. We are going to be transported back to around 2005 to 2013. Soak in the sights and the sounds. I got some funny bits planned. We have some ads that unfortunately need to be played, but it's not too often. I know giving a score to a free trial is a rough way to judge a game, but don't think of this as a serious rating. Think of this as an impression for most of these games, not actual reviews. I have beaten some of these games, and I will mention when I have, but we are mostly looking at all these games so that you can see which ones might possibly be worth checking out for yourself, just before or even after the 360 store closes. I had a final list of at least 717 XBLA games, and there might be a few more that got missed, but there was about 100 games that I didn't have access to in the end. I am still playing and covering a little over 600 games across these videos. I am trying to release as many of these videos before the store closes, but the last few videos are going to end up releasing after it shuts down. Sorry about this, I was in the process of writing scripts and recording footage for this entire series when Microsoft officially announced the closure of the Xbox 360 store for July of 2024. I know, many of you won't see these videos until after the store has closed, so I will also mention if a game was backwards compatible, or if there's a version on Steam or somewhere else that you can maybe still pick it up. I hope this is okay, because I think most gamers would rather have a more up-to-date version of a game, with possibly a better frame rate and a higher resolution if available. If a game had a newer version available on the Xbox One, I often bought that version. I will give each game a score based on a 10-point scale, 1 through 10 using only whole numbers, no decimal points, and no half points. A 5 is average, a 6 is above average, 7 is good, 8 is great, 9 is superb, and a 10 is outstanding. I am also scoring these games based on the entire library of arcade games released on the 360, and not against all of the retail games. Well, at least for the most part. This series of videos is just a fun look at all of the XBLA games I could get my hands on without using a modified console. There was even a recent breakthrough to Xbox 360 modding that happened in early of 2024, as shown here by Spawnwave, but it still requires some soldering knowledge, which means you need to take apart your console. I didn't feel comfortable trying to modify my only fully working Xbox 360, so I decided to do this legit by playing the trials and buying what I could. So sorry if I don't give a high rating to a game that might be one of your personal favorites because I didn't have access to the full game. So does that sound good? All right. First, we have a few rules, because of course we do. I am Striker of Enyo, after all. Number 1, all the games that you will see are from the arcade section on the Xbox 360 storefront. These are not to be confused with games on the on-demand section. Regardless of whether you think some should be considered an on-demand game, if it was in the arcade section, then I will cover it, unless I specify differently. Number 2, for the moment, all games are the trial versions unless I've said otherwise. This list is primarily derived from games having a trial available. If I don't have a playable version of the game, then I will not cover it. Some games were just not available anymore. I have bought around half of the arcade games, so sometimes I will mention that I have played more of the game or even beat it. I might not always have the time to specify exactly how much I played of the game, but please keep in mind that these are not review scores. I give every game a rating based on how much I played of it. These ratings are tentative. My viewpoint of a game might be limited to only what I saw during the trial. Number 3, no Kinect games. I also decided to skip games that require a Kinect, even though they might be arcade games, because it seems that most gamers have very little interest in Kinect-related games, and they don't have access to the hardware itself anymore. I'm sorry about this, but I hope it's understandable. Now for the games list. On the Xbox 360 dashboard, when you look at My Games, you'll see a full list of everything that you've downloaded, arcade, retail, and indie. We are going to sort by arcade, and as you can see, for the arcade games alone, I have downloaded 590 different games on this console, consisting of both trials and full releases. You're going to see me go right down the line and cover every one of these unless I need to switch over to my Xbox One. On my Xbox One, I currently have a list of about 242 some plus games that I bought and are backwards compatible arcade games. Or I bought a native version of the same game on my Xbox One if the 360 version wasn't available. We will be looking at all of these in this list, but I do have a couple of games here that I am just currently playing for fun, like Battlefield 2042, Battlefield 5, oh, and Cat Quest 2. That one's just for me. But the rest are arcade games, or they are collections that have a few arcade games in them that we will cover. We easily have well over 600 arcade games that I have access to. The background for the games will change as we go, but for now we have Dunkin' Donuts, and remember, Shark Week runs on Dunkin', while the sharks run on humans. My motto is that I live my life like every week is Shark Week. So, alright, let's check out some arcade games. It's gonna be fun going back to the past, but many of these games are gonna suck ass. We are going in alphabetical order, so first up is...
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Can you remember the tallest man you've ever seen?
I am the genie of Papartica! Okay, chop chop, 3 wishes.
I want a pet singing lizard.
Squee-da-doo-da-doo-wah, yo, call me.
I want the biggest box of Pop-Tarts in the world.
Kid, start wishing for a bigger toaster.
Part of this complete breakfast.
Crazy good!
Zero-Day Attack on Earth. Now, for the most part, the information on the title card is self-explanatory, but a few things might need clarification. We, of course, have the developer, publisher, and release date, naturally. By the gamerscore symbol, we have the total number of achievement points in the game, and by the trophy symbol is the total number of achievements. This also might be the number of PlayStation trophies, if this applies. All the way to the right is a clock symbol with the estimated time to completion of all the achievements. This number comes from the True Achievements website. I might adjust this number slightly if the time it took me was a little bit different, but please remember that this is the time to get all the achievements, not just to beat the game or earn 100%. Then we have a labeled green box if the game happens to be backwards compatible, which means you can play it on newer Xbox platforms like the Xbox One or the Series X and S. Just because it's backwards compatible doesn't mean that it might be still purchased on those newer platforms, but I will end up specifying which ones as we go. Back to the game. Damn, we are really starting off rough, aren't we? What is one of the most overused subgenres that require little effort and some of the most generic gameplay on a budget? Why, it's our old friend, the twin-stick shooter. This type of game isn't always a sign of a bad experience, but if the game was made after the year 2000, then just be careful before you buy one of these. Zero Day Attack on Earth is a bland name for a game, the type of name that you forget after you've just played it. We have bland visuals, your basic repetitive shooter gameplay, and very little effort by the developers to make you not hate this experience. You always have 3 AI bots fighting alongside you, and they can be replaced with actual players if you so desire. And there is a hint of bullet hell shooter design in there, where you dodge bullets from a certain enemy or boss while you move around to the weak spot. But that is about the only interesting thing that I saw. The most horrendous sin is the constant timer counting down away on many missions. You don't notice it right away, but later it forces you to hurry for no reason. With a Metacritic score of 41, don't expect much. Most professional reviews gave it a score of 40 or less. The official Xbox magazine scored it a 5.0 at the time, and it said that you can beat the game in 2 hours or less. We are going to consider the official Xbox magazine as our Bible for the Xbox Live arcade game coverage and reviews. It was one of the popular Xbox publications for the time, and you'll actually see the UK version sneak in a review here and there. I just happened to get my hands on nearly every issue digitally from the launch of the Xbox 360 all the way through all of 2012. Thanks to Retromags.com, thanks to all the hard work of the curators, scanners, and editors involved with preserving the magazines that they do, not just Xbox 360 related. I have used some of their scans before, and they are always of the most utmost high quality. So many thanks goes out to them, especially the ones that they did for the official Xbox magazine, of which you will be seeing quite a bit of throughout all these videos. I give this game a 3 out of 10. XBLA has more twin-stick shooters than zombie games, and some zombie games are also twin-stick shooters, so there are many more better alternatives to this game. Zero D Beat Drop, made by Cyclone Zero. This game definitely borrows from other rhythm games, but it also has its own unique gameplay. Oh, and your Xbox avatar is there in the background for some reason. One of the big components is the ability to analyze your own music and wrap the gameplay around it. The game will analyze music from a USB drive or your 360 hard drive, determine its beats per minute, and sync the game to your sounds. Unfortunately, I couldn't try this because the trial doesn't let you do that, but the gameplay is your standard make a combo of 3 chains, but you also score points by dropping your currently selected bundle, in what the game calls a beat drop. You can place them wherever you want, but you only score points by dropping that beat. Zero D Beat Drop is probably one of the better puzzle games. You'll see a lot of high scores with this one, a lot of 8s and 9s, but honestly, I can't give this one a score because I don't feel like the trial gives me much. Maybe this looks fun to you, so you might want to download the trial for yourself before the 360 store gets shut down to see if it's worth a full purchase. Gaming Sidebar. It's time for a Gaming Sidebar. Capcom Digital Collection and disc-based games in general. This is a sidebar in the publishing sense, a term for information placed adjacent to an article in a printed or web publication. These will pop up a few times during these videos when I need to address an issue related to a game, but it doesn't quite make sense to talk about it during that particular entry. We do need to mention the physical release of the Capcom Digital Collection and how it works on the Xbox 360 compared to a regular XBLA game. There were a few companies that made a compilation of their arcade games on a physical disc. You might remember seeing Xbox Live Arcade Unplugged volumes, along with the Konami Classics Volume 1 and 2, and PopCap Arcade Volume 1 and 2. The way these earlier game collections worked was a bit odd. The game disc apparently won't launch on its own. Instead, it would add the games on the Xbox Live Arcade menu with a small disc icon next to each name. By the time we get to 2012, Capcom released their own physical disc called the Capcom Digital Collection. This collection works like what you would think. Launch the disc and you get taken to a menu with a list of games to choose. Now here's the rub. Later on, the 360 would gain the ability to install any game on the internal hard drive. This way, the game disc wouldn't need to be constantly spinning while you play a game. It's great, it's awesome. It increases the longevity of your disk drive, and it improves performance in some cases. But if a collection contained a game that was available as an XBLA title, then you could not install the contents of the disk to your hard drive. You had to play it off of the disk, which meant it would always be spinning. Another game that does this is the Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, a compilation of 49 games that is a great package, but you can't install it, possibly due to several games that were also available as XBLA games at the time. The Capcom Digital Collection also works like this as well. You can't install it directly, probably due to some kind of licensing limitation, but it always pissed me off. There are some absolutely great games on the Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, but I don't want to play several 25-hour RPGs with my disk drive constantly spinning. I already had to replace one 360 disk drive and I didn't want to pay for it again. Just let me install the thing, dang it. This has been another Gamming Sidebar. Am I gonna get sued by Retroware TV? They're still around, right? I borrowed their jingle. Aw, man, that little skinny guy is gonna take me to court, isn't he? Gamming Sidebar. Stop that! Is Retro TV still active? Is this them? This is Retroware, but they have new videos? It says at Retroware TV over here. It's gotta be them. But who are these guys? Well, let's check out this newer video.
It's your old pal Combusty Justy here.
Justin Silverman? Formerly from Screenwave and the AVGN videos? I didn't know he was here. Does he own Retroware now? I've heard stories about this guy, but I never really watched him much before. But where's the other guys? Oh, here they are. Yep, good old John D. and the other guy. Mike? Ian? Spanky? Oh, it's Ito. Yeah, good old Ito. Ooh, all these videos are unlisted. I mean, at least they're still here, I guess, but man, it was good times back then. I hope those guys are doing well. 10 Frame Bowling. Now, this is a Kinect title. We're not covering Kinect titles because even though there are some that have trials, there's also several that don't. And honestly, I don't even know where my own Kinect is for the 360. I've got my Xbox One version. I'm assuming most of you don't know where your 360 Kinect is either. 1942 Joint Strike from Backbone Entertainment. Joint Strike takes inspiration and influences from the 1940 X series of World War II themed vertical shooters, and this one has some mixed reviews. It's meant to be a 3D reimagining. Yeah, get used to that word. It might take inspiration from those original games, but it's not directly based on an individual one. The gameplay is so basic that it feels like Capcom just assumed that making a 3D update to their classic game is what people wanted without any thought to making compelling gameplay. It's not bad for a $10 game in 2008, but it's very hard and you don't get many continues. There's no auto fire either, so get ready to push that fire button constantly. It's a 5 out of 10. There are much better shooters on the platform. I got my copy by buying the Capcom Digital Collection, a physical retail version of several of their arcade games, so picking this one up might be a viable option if you want to play this game after the 360 store closes, because it's not backwards compatible. 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures. This was a series that started on Windows back in 1997 with 2 games, and then nearly 10 years later the developer brought a version to the Xbox 360, now called 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures. This was a prime example of what a $10 game could be on XBLA. It had simple 3D models, rather low quality textures, and only 4 characters to choose from. But this was a fun game of minigolf with power-ups, and you could play with up to 4 players, local or online. The original release of the game comes with 3 courses: Outer Space, Classic Carnival, and the Old West, consisting of 36 holes. There are only 2 modes of play, either a single-player tournament consisting of 3 separate course layouts, or a multiplayer game. There is a map editor, but it's very basic, consisting of just a bunch of preset tiles that you can mix together like ramps, intersections, and turns. It's very limiting, and you probably won't spend long here. A number of holes have shortcuts to a hole-in-one that are fun to find, but it gets repetitive because once one player knows about it, then everybody else attempts them. It can take a lot of the challenge away because everyone just goes for the shortcuts instead of playing the hole normally. This game has above average scores for its time. The Metacritic is a 66, with several outlets scoring it between a 5 and a 7. Some said it was fun and that while they liked the visual style, others didn't like the ball physics. It gets a 6 out of 10 for me. For $10, it wasn't a bad deal back then, and sales were slow at first, but within 3 years they had sold over 300,000 copies. At some point, they lowered the game to only $5. It currently sits at slot number 61 of the best-selling arcade games for the arcade section of the marketplace.xbox.com site, just behind Contra and Castlevania's Symphony of the Night. It's a little light on content, but it's a great value at $5. I will emphasize that this game is at its best when played through with friends. Playing solo, you can go through all 36 holes in one setting easily. They added an expansion for only $5, 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures Lost Island, with 18 additional holes set in a tropical Lost Island paradise. The game and the DLC is both backwards compatible, so you can find them on the newer Xbox console storefronts. 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures 2. The original 3D Ultra Minigolf was developed by Wanaco Games and published by Sierra Entertainment, but 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures 2 is listed as a different development team called Artificial Mind and Movement Inc., and is produced by Konami Digital Entertainment. This makes it seem like this is a completely different company, but Wanaco Games was folded into Artificial Mind and Movement later in the same year that this game was released. And they were renamed Behavior Santiago. Yeah, you might be familiar with that name, and we will get to them later. So this game was made by the same team as before. Unfortunately, the game is also found delisted by early 2013 on 360 and the PlayStation 3, and nothing official has ever been posted regarding the game's removal. And it's a shame. The sequel has 54 holes across 3 different themes: Haunted Manor, Manic Museum, and Winter Wonderland. The ball physics have changed, which was also a slight sticking point for some of the last game, but they don't seem as reliable now. I can't seem to repeat the same putt using the same method, but maybe I would eventually adjust after playing more of the game. With everything included, I would give this game a 7 out of 10. Despite the different ball physics, there are more courses than the first game, and their design is a bit more imaginative, and they are bigger and more complicated than before as well. There still are some hole-in-one shortcuts, but they've been thankfully reduced in number drastically. I would love for this series to come back. If this game ever shows up on the storefront again, it's worth checking out. The developer of these 2 games, Artificial Mind and Movement, also known as A2M, was the largest independent game developer in Canada, but late in 2012 they announced they changed their name to Behavior Interactive. They did a number of Xbox 360 games, especially for Xbox Live Arcade, which we will get to later, but some of their most well-known work is creating the hit Dead by Daylight. They are currently working on the new Silent Hill Ascension. They changed their name partially because their old name became available again, and partially because they realized what their initialism, A2M, meant in the porn industry.
You never go ass to mouth, Randall.
You sound like my mom. Bex, do you ever go ass to mouth?
You never go ass to mouth.
You've never gone ass to mouth.
You never go ass to mouth.
Yeah, probably not a good idea to keep it. True story. A Kingdom for Kelflings. First, let's address why I'm covering the Kelfling games here, in the letter A section. The 2 Kelfling games were always sorted on XBLA in the A section, since both games start with the letter A. A Kingdom for Kelflings, A World of Kelflings. On the Xbox One store, they made a change so that when sorting games by name, it ignores the words the or A. So the 2 Kelfling games now get sorted under K and W in the store. I kept them together because this is how they still show up on the Xbox 360 store and also in the My Games section of the menus. A Kingdom for Kelflings was a fun little resource management game that can be rather addictive. A part of the charm is using your avatar and whatever wacky outfit they have on. I chose the Batman outfit, as you can see. It just seems odd that Batman is helping tiny people build their homes in broad daylight. I'm gonna help you move this rock. I'm Batman. Gamer pick unlocked. Oh man, oh man, do you remember unlocking gamer picks when you first played a new arcade game? This game is still very addictive, but I was surprised at the lack of structure. Playing a game like this today, you expect a more robust tutorial, then move me to a new area with resources nearby, and then give me some more advanced buildings to take care of. Maybe show me how to control my Kelflings a bit more, and to be fair, that's what the sequel does. but the original just kind of lets you keep going and going in the same location. But it's still fun despite needing some control and gameplay tweaks. 6 out of 10. The official Xbox magazine gave it a 9.0 back during its release, so you really can't go wrong with this game. This will probably take you around 5 hours to beat, but you could spend 15 plus hours doing all the side quests. There are 2 additional DLCs for $2 a piece, Kingdom Pack number 1 and 2, and each one has 2 new kingdom layouts, easily giving you a couple more hours each of playtime. I am Batman. I'm sorry about that Flash movie. The 2 Kelfling games have remained popular on XBLA with positive reviews, and with both being in the top 50 best-selling arcade games for the Xbox 360 to date. World has often been a little more popular, currently being 10 slots above Kingdom in sales. They haven't sold as well as Portal, Doom, or Peggle, but they're rather close. A World of Kelflings. I played a bit of this one before. I got 9 achievements, but I couldn't find my save file, so I had to start all over again. Really? You recognize I own Band of Bugs? Sure, I'll take a free emote. And Cloning Clyde, and Comic Jumper? A World of Kelflings is an improvement over the original game in many ways. I ended up playing this one for 4 hours straight when replaying it for these videos. The story is the one where you get frozen in ice and they end up finding you. And obviously I played as my avatar, dressed as Optimus Prime. What better character to play as when helping other people? There are chapters now, you complete them and move on to the next thing the game wants to teach you. You have talking sequences with dialogue between characters, and they have a good sense of humor. You can still upgrade your Kelflings by slapping them, it never gets old.
It has been an honor serving with you all. You have done a good job. Optimus Prime is proud of you. Sorry, kick is the same button as slap. I didn't mean it. Optimus Prime is sorry. Oops, wait, was that Kenny? Yeah, he deserved it. He knows what he did.
They work better and faster when you upgrade them, so it helps to have them stick with a profession. The queue for building stuff is longer, and the game shows you exactly which items you need to build the highlighted blueprint, how many of each, and if you already built it before. You can even move buildings around, and oh, this is great. What? I can even name them? This is Rocketeer and Rockette. They're my high-level rock miners. They're women, of course, because women get all the hard labor jobs in my world. Rock cutting, mining crystals, cutting wood, you name it. While the men are the gatherers, the sculptors, the painters, and the teachers. Anything to make it easy on them. I mean, come on, men have it hard in the real world, so it's only fair I give them cushy jobs in the World of Kelflings. You got a very fun resource management game, though some of the humor is aimed at younger players, so it might not work for you. I like the progression way more. And all the dialogue with the other characters can be humorous. I finished the main story in a little over 8.5 hours, but you could spend at least 12 hours altogether to do everything. Once you add all 3 of the DLCs, you get a much more enjoyable and better designed experience than the first game, as long as you don't mind spending a little extra money, $4 US for each one. Good game, 7 out of 10 for this one. There is a certain charm to the visuals and humor, but some might find it way too repetitive. It has a few problems, but this has so many improvements. Abyss Odyssey from Ace Team. This is a side-scrolling action-adventure, but it also has roguelike dungeon crawler features. But I'm not sure how you would ultimately classify this. You have a set map difficulty layout, but the levels themselves are procedurally generated. You keep traveling down these levels to get to the bottom of a map. When you die, you start back at the top and must do it again, but you do get to keep some stuff that you've gathered. I have seen another reviewer mention that the combat is complex and highly addictive, and once you get more familiar with it, it becomes much better. I only have the trial, which gives you a decent amount of playtime, but I can only choose one of the 3 warriors. Let's start with the obvious. The game's presentation is very weak when you start. The art style itself and the drawings look beautiful, but the gameplay visuals are very lacking for 2014 on the PlayStation 3 and the 360. The game also just kind of throws you in without any kind of introduction or backstory. First big obstacle is getting to grips with the controls. The tutorial does a piss-poor job in explaining how the game works. There are aspects that are pivotal to the game that you won't get explained to you. After the opening part, I didn't understand how to use the Y button or triangle on PlayStation 3. It can be customized to do a number of things, but the tutorial doesn't properly teach you. There are other things like character growth and what death means that would be nice to know. Characters move rather stiff, and fighting feels kind of clunky for me. This could be another game that takes place in a dream. We will run into several of these coming up. I'm not entirely sure about this one, but you are trying to confront a warlock whose dreams are infecting reality in the late 19th century. So it seems like we are in the dream, and we are trying to find him, but I'm not sure. And this one gets a 4 out of 10. Some might like it. The art style is enough to want to jump in, but for a full price $15 arcade game, there are other games that play similar that are much better. The Metacritic score for the 360 is a 64 with no positive reviews. The user score is nearly identical at 6.5. The following year, the PlayStation 4 got an updated version, Abyss Odyssey Extended Dream Edition. And while there seems to be some improvements, the Metacritic score doesn't really reflect this, being a 65 on the PlayStation 4. This game is not backwards compatible, so the 360 or PlayStation 4 versions are your only choices on consoles. Aces of the Galaxy. This was a good and competent 3D space shooter when it first released back in 2008. It was $10 and it had more polish than even some shooters on the PlayStation 1 that were asking for full price. Nowadays, it's kind of average and it gets rather repetitive after a while. There's not much depth in the gameplay and the flashy visuals worked for their time, but they're not as impressive now. They did knock it down to only $5, which is a much better price, but the difficulty curve later on might hinder your enjoyment. A 5 out of 10. You might find some more enjoyment out of it, but the quality of $5 games is rather impressive on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, so there's really no reason to spend money on this. The Adventures of Shuggy. This is a 2D puzzle platformer from Smudged Cat Games. What a name. It's fairly average, but it does try to do a few different things. You need to save the world from the nasties. Yes, the game actually calls them that. There is an action button that can do different things depending on the level, like one where you can rotate the level, but you need to make sure that you don't kill yourself. Then some feature a time slip where a copy of you gets activated after so many seconds, and they perform the exact same actions that you just did. This is kind of interesting, but don't touch yourself, or you both die, just like in Time Cop. I also found this game to be very frustrating, but when you look at the Metacritic score, it's a 77, and the reviews are generally favorable. I can only give this one a 5 out of 10, but I'm in the minority here. For $5, you get 116 single-player levels and about 5 hours of gameplay. Our Holy Bible of Gaming, the official Xbox magazine, gave it a 7.5, which does qualify it as a good game, but you will need some patience for some of the levels. This was one of the last games released by Valcon Games, a developer and publisher of video games based out of Bellevue, Washington. They went out of business or got bought out, so all their XBLA games have been delisted for many years. They published a number of games on PlayStation 2 and the Nintendo DS, like Crazy Frog Racer 2 and Bodie Miller Alpine Skiing. One of their more recognizable newer titles might be Ski-Doo, Snowmobile Challenge, on PlayStation 3, the Wii, and the 360. And they were also behind The Darkest of Days, the game where you time travel back to the Civil War with modern weapons. Granted, they were the publisher and not the developer, but the game was not well received. There's only a couple more games from them to come, but let's move on to the next one. Aegis Wing. This is a 2007 side-scrolling shooter mostly developed by 3 independent Microsoft interns in a matter of 3 months, back in the summer of 2006. The Microsoft XNA toolkit wasn't around yet, so they needed to create some of their own tools to make the game. They then handed off their work to Carbonated Games to be polished and finished into a final game for the Xbox Live Arcade. It was rather impressive for what they did back then to make a game in only 3 months, and it remained completely free, up to it being delisted on the February 7th, 2023 Marketplace update. But it's exactly what you would expect from a game made by interns in a short amount of time. This is a very basic shooter with no frills and very little to do. This is a 2 out of 10. You'll get bored quickly. There are much better shooters on the platform.
Talk to me, Goose.
Afterburner Climax from Sega. This was originally an arcade game that released in June of 2006, and it made its way to the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 digital storefronts in 2010. It moves fast, it's flashy, and it looks amazing. And it's delisted. Oh, man. Well, that was quick. By December of 2014, it was removed, only being on the market for a little over 3 years. Afterburner Climax is a visual update to their old school arcade game. The original Afterburner came out in 1987 and was a worldwide success. This is easily the best 3D interpretation of the series ever made. I never bought it. I was able to find my downloaded trial on my 360 profile. You only get to access the first few missions, so I did what I could to show you the game. I mean, look at this. This is awesome. There's not a lot to the gameplay, but it looks fantastic and it plays well for what it is. You get a branching storyline and over 20 stages. A single playthrough only takes you about 30 or 40 minutes, but you'll need several runs before you end up seeing it all. So why was it delisted? Well, at a certain point, Sega decided to use real licenses for their vehicles in some of their games, namely Outrun and Afterburner. Rockstar and most other companies know to just create knockoffs instead of trying to renew and keep up with multiple licensed vehicles. For Afterburner Climax, someone at Sega had the bright idea to get real licenses for all the aircraft. The F-14 Tomcat, the F-5, the A-10 Thunderbolt II, and a few more. So now they need to renew contracts with at least 4 different companies every few years. Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, North American Aviation, not to mention all the product markings and logos. It's a shame this game is gone, but hey, if it pops up somewhere else, you might want to check it out. Age of Booty from Capcom. This is a casual, real-time strategy game set in the time of pirates. You can play this by yourself, there are single-player challenges, and AI bots will fill any empty slots, but the real strength of this game is the multiplayer. Players team up with others online in pirate ships to capture towns, sink random ships for power-ups, gather resources to upgrade your ships, and settlements under your control. You click where you want to move and what you want to attack, and you destroy other players along the way. It's a simple interface, colorful visuals, and it plays well. There's even a map editor that lets you make your own decent-sized maps to share. Searching for online games nowadays is nearly impossible, but if you can gather some friends together, consider picking up this game when it goes on a sale. Originally it was $10, but now you can grab it for only $5. But you can even find it for as low as $1 on a big holiday. You can play this on newer Xbox consoles with backwards compatibility, so why not? It's a 7 out of 10 for multiplayer, but only a 5 out of 10 if you only have the single-player content available to you. There's just not much to do by yourself. If you're still on PlayStation 3, then you apparently have 9 free map packs. It's a shame that Xbox never got those. AirMech Arena. This was a free-to-play competitive real-time strategy game. It was 2 to 6 players online, and you might notice I'm using the word was. That's because the game is delisted on Xbox 360 Arcade, and the servers are gone. Some of this footage isn't mine because I never got past the opening loading screens. There is an Xbox One version, but it also was shut down as well. It looks like a decent enough game, but I can't give it a score. The game won't load anything past the title screen, so let's move on. Alan Wake's American Nightmare. Remedy Entertainment has always put a lot of thought and time behind their idea of Alan Wake, but they always have meant for each game to be a complete story on its own. The first Alan Wake game was meant to be like Season 1, with the DLC content becoming a short mini-series, or like a TV movie event that would bridge the gap between going into Season 2, which would be Alan Wake 2. So where does Alan Wake's American Nightmare fit in? Well, this was announced to be a standalone XBLA game, and it was meant to expand the world of Alan Wake, but not necessarily expand the story. The story in this game could be an attempt by Alan to get out of the dark place, but nothing has ever been confirmed by Remedy themselves, so it's just speculation. The story mode in Alan Wake's American Nightmare plays out like an old episode of the Twilight Zone series, complete with a Rod Sterling sound-alike narrator. In the Alan Wake universe, the show is called Night Springs, and this game takes place inside of an episode of the show. It's been 2 years after the first game, and it continues Alan's battle with Mr. Scratch. Alan is collecting pages from his The Return manuscript, which is what he was working on at the end of the DLC. This is a much more action-focused game than the narrative-driven nature of the original. You also have access to more weapons than before, multiple pistols, shotguns, and even an assault rifle. The same flashlight mechanic from the first game is back. In the game itself, you usually need to find 3 items and put them in their place, and then you need to do this on 3 different maps. In the end, you are trying to get everything put in the right place, only to find out it didn't work and that the signal that you desperately needed didn't go through. So now you are reset back to the beginning area. You need to complete this loop a total of 3 times before you get it right. Now, it's not exactly the same game each time, there are some differences, and each loop is a bit shorter the next time you do it. Characters do seem to remember talking to you in the previous loops, and there are some interesting conversations and dialogue with them as Alan explains what's going on with him. The story for this game is actually really good. The voice acting is solid, and the writing expands on what you learned in the first game and the DLC. Still, you are playing the same 3 maps 3 times. As I got to the end of the second loop, I was still interested enough to keep pushing forward. They throw a lot more enemies at you as things go on, but you do have ample health and ammo pickups as long as you look around for them. And if you have the required number of pages, you can unlock more powerful weapons in the weapon crates as you repeat those loops. The assault rifle was awesome. By the 3rd repeat, it does get a little annoying, but stick with it, the story is worth it.
You should be careful, really careful.
Yeah, I
Damn it, Spillage, stop ruining my recordings! You're nearly the only one on my friends list that still signs into their 360! The game also has an arcade mode. You need to survive for 10 minutes total against waves of increasingly difficult enemies across 5 different maps. The maps are small and points are earned for enemies killed. You are also awarded score streaks for kills, successfully dodging attacks, and for not taking damage. All of this affects your multiplier, which determines your overall score. It might seem like the arcade mode is a throwaway gimmick, but you're encouraged to keep coming back since the journal entries that you find in story mode unlock weapons in the arcade mode. It's fun trying to beat your top score, and having additional weapons makes things easier. It's just a shame that this mode doesn't have a cooperative multiplayer aspect to it. 8 out of 10 for the whole package. The story mode should last a little under 5 hours, and the combat introduces more weapons and more enemies than the original Alan Wake, and the mechanics work a bit better. The Enlightened Tomb of the official Xbox magazine gave this a 4-page review for it. They gave it an 8.5. Well worth it.
very peculiar signal.
The dialogue is well written, and damn, lady, them some big old tits.
Go ahead and bust those out, bitch. Go ahead and bust the tits out now. Go ahead and bust the tits out, baby. Go ahead and bust the tits out, baby. Go ahead and bust the tits out, baby. Gotta bust those tits out, baby. Gotta go ahead and bust the tits out, baby. Gotta go ahead and bust the tits out. Gotta go.
Tell him, Mark. I wouldn't mind being trapped in this dreamlike place here myself. Dear God, those are some nice fiery biscuits. American Nightmare was not packaged along with the new Alan Wake remastered version, so you do need to buy it separately. Fans of Alan Wake and the lore will find a lot to love. You really should play the original game though, and the DLC first, because American Nightmare does basically spoil several events from the first game. This game sold 100,000 copies by December 2012, and to date it has moved at least 190,000 copies. Alien Breed Episode 1 Evolution. The Alien Breed games came to both the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 for $5 US each. And we ended up seeing 3 games total. It was actually a resurrection of a much-admired franchise that appeared on the Commodore Amiga long ago. This is a reboot of the series using Unreal Engine 3 with some of the same team members that were involved with the originals. So it technically uses a twin-stick shooter setup, but you don't get swarmed by a multitude of enemies like in Smash TV or Robotron on a consistent basis. It's a bit more deliberately designed than that, so we're not going to just call this another cheap knockoff twin-stick shooter. The environments look great, but the gameplay itself is kinda boring, and it gets very repetitive. You'll need to open a door, but there's no power to it. You can't turn on the power because you don't have the security clearance to do so.
Access denied.
So you need to find the security codes. Once you get the codes, you can open the door, but now you need to shut down some reactor, but you need to do it at several different terminals. Then you need a key card to gain access to a room at the other end of the map. Then you need to suppress the fire in another room, which takes 2 terminals to find and activate. Then another door is locked, so back you go to find another key card around the bottom of the map, and you do this for 45 minutes. And this is just the first mission. The whole time, the aliens are constantly popping out of holes in the ground and walls at every turn. Seriously, every time you hit a dead end and you find yourself going back for a key card or to look for a terminal, boom, aliens jump out and they often attack you from both sides. The whole time you're doing this, it's just a computer voice that gives you updates.
Key card required. All crew, AirMech Arena. Operation successful.
Info is told through text on screen, which is supposed to be your crewmates sending you instructions over your PDA, I believe, but there is no audible dialogue. You need to scavenge for gear like health kits, ammo, and grenades. And explosions are going off all around you, like Michael Bay just discovered how to copy and paste effects in Unreal Engine. There is a kind of creepy mood with the lighting and music, and there is the occasional boss fight or some special sequence that requires different tactics. But besides those, there's just not much innovation. There's no autosave, so you need to physically save at numerous points so you don't lose too much progress. Well, save slot 3, of course, because, well, I'm not an animal. The first game has 5 missions that should take you about 3 or 4 hours at most, and the other games seem to have the same completion time. The co-op might be worth trying, but it's a 5 out of 10 for me. The Alien Breed games were decent to average shooters back then when they were released, but nowadays they are quite average, if not slightly below that. Alien Breed Episode 2, Assault. The second game here plays a lot like the first one. We are back to the usual, explosions everywhere once again. We need to activate a generator, which blows out a circuit, so we need to get the circuit breaker. Turn on the generator to get some light, find a key card, get immediately attacked, open a door, then we need to get access to a room, but oh no, it's flooded with coolant! Now we gotta open the coolant gates to drain it all out. Done, but there's an error. All the coolant didn't drain. Oh, goody. Now we need to go down to the pipe junction room, so let's head down a bit, and oh no, an explosion is blocking our way. There's radiation in the room. We need to clear it out. Now let's open both the pump valves to finally drain the coolant, and oh no, now we need a new pump valve. Son of a bitch. I swear, if I get attacked again as I check a corpse, damn it! Get the part, open the valve, then reboot the system. Oh no, aliens attack. Are you seeing how monotonous and tedious this gets? If we had some spoken dialogue between 2 characters to liven things up or add some humor, this would be more tolerable. I'm really starting to hate this series. Well, time to save my game. Save slot 3, of course. Like always, I'm not a degenerate after all. I didn't even check the corpse yet. I was just standing on it. Fuck this game design. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Every time I check a corpse, I get attacked. But this time, I didn't even check the corpse yet. I was just standing on it. Aliens pop up behind you all the time. To be fair, there aren't as many explosions as the first game, so it's not quite as annoying, but this is a 4 out of 10 for me this time. The first mission took me a little over 1 hour to finish. Granted, I might have set my controller down a few times to jot a few things down in a document, but still. Imagine playing this for an hour, repairing machines, activating consoles, draining coolant, opening floodgates, and being attacked by the same 3 aliens the whole time. No dialogue with other characters. Bland music the whole way, with most info given to you through on-screen text. I was generous with the first one, but this is exactly the same game. It's below average now. Oh, I don't like this. A room with several corpses to search. I mean, there's no way they would attack me in a small room like this. Oh, come on! This is still the first level. The first frickin' level! Alien Breed Episode 3 Descent. Episode 3 Descent came out within about 2 months of Episode 2, so don't expect too many changes between the two games. Everything about this game is identical to what you've seen in the other two. You got missions full of activating consoles, rerouting power, grabbing key cards, draining water, activating a halon system when the room is full of fire, you know, nothing new.
Keycard required.
They still attack you when you start searching a corpse. Seriously, they do it twice in the same room, barely 5 minutes into the gameplay. You know it's programmed because you can see the enemy red dot appear on the radar right when you start to search the corpse. Did you see that? The moment I started searching, the red dot pops up. Now, it's not every time you try to search a new corpse or open up a container or something, but it happens so often that it gets just tiring after a while. The only difference this time is that you seem to be trying to stop a cybernetic AI that has taken over your friend named Maya. The recap doesn't explain the whole story, but it does seem like you're moving toward a goal this time around. There is also another presence that chimes in with some dialogue a few times during the mission.
She's a primitive design, but nonetheless fascinating to dissect.
Like, this is cool. I wish the series would do this more often. You do get a boss fight and a story wrap-up. It's nice they were trying something new with the story, but the gameplay mechanics work the same. Wait, why does the evil AI have a massive rack? Damn. It's the same 3 to 4 monsters attacking you, and they do have a few different monsters that get introduced later, but still, they all just run straight at you and bite you for the most part. It takes hours before they even introduce one that shoots projectiles at you, and it seems like they don't really have ones that have shields or energy waves that you need to defeat. There's just no variety to them. Or it takes way too long for them to introduce them to you in the first place. The co-op here in Episode 3 might be worth trying, but it's a 4 out of 10 for me. Official Xbox Magazine reviewed all 3 games by the same guy, Chuck Osborne. He gave the first 2 games a 6.0, which was above average at the time. But the third game he gave a 7.5. He apparently liked the added scripted sequences and some more variety in the environments, even though much of the game plays the same. I own all 3 of these games on the 360, but you can also find an updated PC version on GOG.com under the name Alien Breed Trilogy. It's normally $24 US, but it can go on sale for around $5, so try that version if you prefer a mouse and keyboard. Alien Breed Impact is the 4th episode, but it only came out on PC back in 2010, but you can also find it on GOG.com. Alien Hominid 360 from the Behemoth. Alien Hominid originally started out as a Adobe Flash game, originally released on Newgrounds in August of 2002. Yeah, Newgrounds, that might take some of you back. The game consisted of 1 level containing 2 bosses, and it was free to play. It was very popular, and it had been downloaded over 20 million times. This led to a console version on PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. This game was originally known as Alien Hominid HD, a high-definition version that was released on the Xbox Live Arcade service for the 360 in 2007, but it was renamed to Alien Hominid 360 during 2023. This was because they had a new updated version being released as Alien Hominid HD that would include all the previous DLC content, along with now being displayed in 4K. This is a side-scrolling shooter in a similar style to games like Contra and Metal Slug. You die in 1 hit, and there's 2-player couch co-op. The bosses have recognizable patterns, but you might take several tries in order to figure them out. The game can be hard, and sometimes you won't know exactly what the game wants you to do in order to proceed, causing you to die a few times until you finally figure it out. The hand-drawn art style looks fantastic, and it adds a lot of personality that most shooters of the time just don't have. The humor is done quite well, and you might find a smile on your face throughout your time with the game. There are several minigames, some of which have actual online support, including ranked matches and leaderboards. This game is still fun, 7 out of 10. I thought it would be too difficult for a lot of people, but I think adjusting the difficulty settings makes it more manageable. Alien Hominid 360 is backwards compatible, but you might want to pick up the newer package of Alien Hominid HD instead. It has some more updated features, all the previous DLC, and 4K support. Developer The Behemoth would go on to make Castle Crashers and later BattleBlock Theater. Alien Rage from CI Games. Alien Rage, also known as Alien Fear in some territories, is an Unreal Engine 3 powered arcade first-person shooter. And at first it looks like a passable first-person shooter experience, but even for $10 it doesn't do anything remarkable. The voice acting is adequate and it has a few good lines.
Get in, poke around, pull out, no heroics. Sounds like your idea of a perfect date.
The main character sounds gruff and is obviously too cool to care about doing his job. He can only carry 2 main weapons, naturally. Cloaked enemies start showing up in the first 5 minutes of the game. And don't forget the big staple of first-person shooter games, a high score, which is visible on screen at all times. This game also does that thing where your aim is steady, but your shots automatically randomize when you fire. It's really annoying, and I'm glad this aspect finally stopped after we moved away from the 360 and the PlayStation 3. This was an average game when it came out, but now it's below average at best. 4 out of 10. We have better options coming up. CI Games might be a little familiar to you. It's a Polish video game developer and publisher that has been around since 2002. They originally started out as a budget range game company, but their success led to making full-priced games. Today, they are most notable for the Sniper Ghost Warrior series and the Lords of the Fallen series. Alien Spidy. This is a very challenging platform adventure game. You get a cute little animation to start the game out with, and it's not bad. Once you get into the gameplay, however, you will quickly realize the controls are just not precise enough. Shooting your web to swing is a nice mechanic, but many times I could not get it to shoot in the right direction. I also lost count of how many times I would hit the jump button, but my spider just wouldn't respond. Look at this. Does this look fun to you? You just keep repeating the same action until you get that exact right timing that the developer wants. Challenging platforming is one thing, but I just don't think it's balanced very well. 4 out of 10. Altered Beasts from Sega. This is a faithful port of the original 1988 arcade game. It's your standard action beat-em-up that found its way to a number of 8-bit and 16-bit consoles back then. Altered Beasts is a remnant of the arcades from over 30 years ago. That might be a nice nostalgic trip for those that remember it, but otherwise there's not much to it today. You can beat the game in 20 minutes and there really aren't any extras. I wanted to kind of buy this in time for this video, but I have played through it on other collections, and even for only $5, there's just not much value here. If you don't have any nostalgia for Altered Beasts, it's a 3 out of 10. Sega also does this thing that I might not be able to mention every time, but with many games in their Sega Vintage Collection design of their games, they do not let you watch the intro to the game in full screen. No, seriously, this little box off to the side, that's the actual intro to the game, but you can't zoom into it. Once you pick Start Game, it just goes right into the gameplay. They also do this with the release of Phantasy Star 2 on the 360 as well, where you can't even watch the opening cinematic of this classic RPG. They would fix this in later releases, but this is just one of those many factors that prove that Sega had kind of stopped caring about delivering value to the gamer around this time. We will see more examples as we go on. Amy, developed by Vector Cell. Amy is a survival horror / action adventure game where players must protect and escort Amy, a mysterious 8-year-old autistic girl with powers that the Metacritic scores a 25. A 25! IGN gave the game a 2. This is a notoriously bad game. It was a $10 game that tried to offer a full-on console-type survival horror experience on a budget. It was way over-ambitious with the size of the team that they had, trying to do cutscenes with voice acting and lip-syncing, character animation, and trying to do a stealth game with combat, horror elements, creepy music, and attempting to create intense moments. It really didn't work. The story follows Lana, a woman who is trying to protect and save a little girl named Amy, who has unique powers and a learning disability. This is just one giant cliche after another. Good lord, this game does not play well. The 360 seems to struggle just to run the opening cutscene, with constant pauses and audio dropping out.
Did you get out? Yes.
The acting is bad, but the dialogue is just terrible. Like the writer doesn't know how to write natural dialogue between characters.
A cold winter. I thought the planet was supposed to be heating up.
I think we have a few centuries before we'll need to be wearing shorts in December.
The camera is absolutely atrocious. It doesn't know how to properly follow. The gameplay is constantly freezing for a half a second at a time, and the screen tearing is persistent. Just gonna let me walk by? Okay, I guess you didn't see me. Wait, now you hear me? God damn it. Amy is still one of the worst performing games on XBLA on a technical level. I think people would be forgiving if the writing and the story was a little decent, or if at least it had some interesting ideas, but it's really a mess overall. They did reduce this game down to $5 US, and you can still get a good 4 hours out of it, but the quality just is not there. 2 out of 10. It's not backwards compatible, so if you want a copy of this travesty for yourself, then you need to buy it before the 360 storefront goes away. The official Xbox magazine gave it a 4.0 and mentioned the poor stealth, awful combat, and how everything is done to pad out the game. Developer Vector Cell might sound a little familiar to you, as well as the publisher Lexus Numerique, but it's for the wrong reasons. We'll see them again a little later. Alright, gotta activate the alarm, get around the corner, and let the guard go by. It's so hard moving when they do this split screen view. Amy, follow me! Get over here! Get around the corner. Did you let that guard see you? Does this game let the girl blow your cover? God damn it, Amy! No, don't shoot me! Shoot the girl! You want the girl! Ancients of Ooga. This game comes from developer Ninja Bee, the creators of Cloning Clyde. Ancients of Ooga is a puzzle-based platformer where you are trying to rescue your fellow tribe members. One of the main mechanics is that you cannot carry things in your hands while you climb a ladder, which makes sense. So instead you hold it in your mouth. Perfectly plausible. You can carry anything in your mouth. Drinks, bombs, and even your fellow tribesmen. When you get to your destination, you can then puke them back out. Need to pick something else up? Just spit out what you got or swallow it. And yes, you can even swallow your friends, and they don't mind it. You are actually playing as an Ooga spirit. You can possess anyone in the tribe as long as they meet certain conditions. Swap between people in your tribe at will. They don't mind, it's all for the greater good.
How can this be for the greater good? Shut it!
There is a humorous side to most of your objectives, making this a relatively fun and charming game. Things do get a bit more repetitive as the game goes on, and co-op isn't as well designed, but I like this better than Cloning Clyde. It's above average, a 6 out of 10. It looks like this wasn't a big seller with only about 25,000 confirmed sold. Anna Extended Edition. The original Anna released on July 2012 on Windows and was criticized for the absurdity of its narrative, having a complex interface, a poor translation, and the difficulty of its puzzles. So 2 years later we got Anna Extended Edition. It has been given an overhaul based on the feedback from the players of the original, and it features more hours of gameplay with more environments, more puzzles, additional gameplay features, enhanced graphics, and an improved interface. I will remind you that the Xbox One launch was November of 2013. The Xbox 360 version of Anna came out 10 months after. I kept looking through several reviews saying that this version was a definite improvement over the original. It was more understandable with a stronger narrative, more content, more accessible puzzles, and blah blah blah. I figured, okay, this should be pretty refined then. So I started the game and apparently I wake up in a dream. I really hate the way this game is designed. It plays like a 3D point-and-click adventure game. I don't like the bloom effect in the starting area at all. Have you ever accidentally turned on light mode? Yeah, it's kind of like that. So I need to get into the house. The main door is shut. It has some mechanical thing to it, but it's not working. I look around. No other doors let me in. I try interacting with anything. I try the help system. In the help and options, there is a help system that you can turn on or off. It doesn't help. It gives me the same response. Then I find a door under the stairs. Finally, this will get me in. There's one item. I'm still stuck. The area is not big. There's nothing obvious to click on. There's a pile of rocks, but I can't interact with it. I found a leaf. It's been 8 minutes. I know I'm missing something. It's only a trial. I try my knife. I try using every inventory item on each other. It's now been 12 minutes. So I just looked up a guide. Apparently that pile of rocks, you need to hover the cursor over the flat pebble. When the cursor changes to a hand, you can then drag it away from the pile of rocks by moving the left analog stick and while holding A. Well, how the hell was I supposed to figure that out? The game doesn't tell you that clicking and dragging objects is even a thing. I didn't know that option existed. Does this sound like fun to you? I'm skipping some steps for brevity's sake, but you will find another gear and combine them into the little spring, and now you finally have a repaired gear. Shove it in that hole, and now you can enter the sawmill. Why do I need to go through all of this just to open a door? Remember, this is a dream. I spent 15 minutes picking up objects, looking at them in the menus, trying to combine them or use them on something. I looked around while inside, but I was done. I decided to leave the sawmill through the front door, and then it gives me a prompt, but I didn't care. And then I got a secret ending. No, seriously, it gave me one of the official endings for the game, in the trial. These visuals are weak. I also found out the game has random events and certain time limits which will prevent you from getting some endings. You apparently have a short time frame to complete many actions before a random event occurs, and I don't think the game lets you know this is even a mechanic. This is supposed to have horror elements to it, but the puzzles are so poorly constructed that it took me way too long just to get in that first building. The reviews are better on PC, but both the 360 and PlayStation 3 versions don't even have enough reviews to have a rating on Metacritic. It's a 3 out of 10. I might buy a copy before the 360 store closes just so I can do a video on it later, but for $10 I really can't recommend it to anybody unless you kinda liked what you saw. If that's the case, good luck. Anomaly Warzone Earth. This game was critically acclaimed on PC when it released. It was known as the first tower offense strategy game ever. Instead of building towers to slow down a group of attackers, like you would in your standard tower defense game, in Anomaly Warzone Earth, you play as the attacker. There are also some added RTS elements, like resource gathering, along with upgrading and healing individual units. You are trying to lead a small column of vehicles to a goal. You can plan your route and try to avoid certain enemies, but you will also need to make changes on the fly, as the battlefield will change and require a different approach. These vehicles are always moving forward, they cannot stop, so you need to act fast, but you can also make them circle a block if you need some time. You can take direct control of your commander as they move around on their own, grabbing airdrops, aggroing enemies, or causing a diversion. I was having a lot of fun. The trial lets you play 5 missions, which gives you a good 15 to 20 minutes of play. It starts slow, but it lets you get familiar with the controls. The story is 14 missions, and it'll take you about 7 hours to complete, but there's also survival and raid modes to unlock. It's a good amount of content for $10. I know it's a budget game, but man, is this world blurry and largely out of focus. It can get repetitive later on, too. There's a limited number of units, and you only have 4 abilities total as the commander, but it's still an enjoyable experience for what it is. After 13-some-plus years from its original launch, I still think it holds up well. 7 out of 10. It's a good game. It was a shame that Xbox users never got any of the sequels. There have been 5 titles total in the series: Anomaly Warzone Earth, Anomaly 2, Anomaly Defenders, Anomaly Korea, and Anomaly Warzone Earth Mobile Campaign. The mobile campaign is just the same missions from the first game, but it's made for a mobile platform. Anomaly Korea is a 12-mission expansion campaign to the original game. So the aliens are not from Korea, they are merely attacking Korea. I just want to be clear about that, Korea is not the enemy. Anomaly 2 definitely took the concept from the original game and made some improvements. The good news is that all 5 of these games can be found on GOG.com, and when they go on sale, you can find them for dirt cheap. Like this sale here from May of 2023, you might be able to pick up the entire series for around $6 US, or less if you catch it at the right time. I got the whole series now, minus the mobile campaign, but I believe you can still find most of these on Steam as well. Aqua. This was a halfway decent shooter when it came out, and it uses a steampunk aesthetic, with an interesting art style. The world is mostly flooded in this alternate reality. It got some praise for attempting to do more than the typical twin-stick shooter, and it has a decent enough length of 6 hours plus for a $5 game. It has different ships, upgrades, power-ups, and some good visuals, but many expressed disappointment with the number of escort missions that you had to do. The gameplay kinda gets boring for me after a few hours in, so 5 out of 10. It tries to change things up, and it earned many above average scores on release, but sales were low. When you look at the entire catalog of XBLA games, Aqua is better than some, but it really is only average today. Eris, Extinction Agenda EX. It sure does feel like Mega Man. You play as a robot destroying other robots while your friends are also robots. The controls show that you can shoot with the X button or the right analog stick pointed in the desired direction, but the stick wasn't responsive enough for me to actually rely on it in a fight. Plus, jumping just doesn't feel good, and you need to have tight controls in a game like this. Visually, the game looks fine for its price point, and the music is decent at times. I just don't see the value here. It gets an average score, 5 out of 10. It's been delisted for years, even before the 360 store was closing. The developer does have a sense of humor because at the release of Mighty No. 9, they made the decision to celebrate by putting their game on a considerable discount. That is kind of funny, Greg Miller. Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Make the Grade. Published by THQ. If you don't know, the show has contestants answering questions from elementary grade school quizzes to win $1 million. What's with the guy that looks like John Cena?
And his name is John Cena!
Wait, that is John Cena? John Cena hosted Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? I completely missed that. This version of the show is rather stripped down, but you can still have some fun with friends. Jeff Foxworthy is here, but he doesn't have many lines. There is no time limit, but I like how many of the questions aren't as easily looked up on Google by the way they're worded. Some are so basic that you think the game is trying to trick you, and it might be, but it really does pay off to know certain subjects. I always like to answer the hardest questions first because, well, why play the game for 10 minutes if you're just gonna flunk out at that last hard question anyway? If you can get the hard ones out of the way, then it should be easy to mop up the rest. Wait, what? You don't even get to try to answer the $1 million question in the trial version? Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense, otherwise you'd have access to the whole game, huh? This version of the game was delisted by December of 2011. It gets a 4 out of 10. If you're really looking for a good XBLA quiz show game, then I think Wits and Wagers is definitely one you should try out. Don't be confused by the name, there are several different iterations of the show across all platforms of the time. We are looking at Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Make the Grade. This was the digital-only version on XBLA and PSN, and it only took up about 98 megabytes. But there's also a Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Game Time, which saw a full retail release, which I also own. Game Time is basically a bigger budget version of the arcade title. Jeff Foxworthy has more dialogue and he can be relatively amusing at times, just like the real show. You can actually pick a character to represent yourself on screen. There are several more modes, including multiplayer, and there's even more detail in the backgrounds. Overall, the presentation is just slightly better. Game Time is from a different developer and offers a much better experience than the XBLA version, but I would only give it a 6 out of 10 if I were to score it. It feels more like the show, it has more content, more dialogue, but if you never grew up on the Foxworthy version, then you might not find much to like anyway.
There are some questions even 5th graders can't answer. That's all she wrote, partner. You just flunked out.
I can't believe I flunked out.
Arkadian Warriors. This is a dungeon crawler in the style of the old arcade game Gauntlet, and I believe it was the first game to be considered an action RPG on XBLA. This is what many would call baby's first action RPG, and that is a fitting description. You build up your skills and your inventory along the way, but the main selling point of this game is randomly generated dungeons. Yep, a feature that was relatively popular on the original PlayStation back in 1996. It's the same tagline I've heard for over 25 years, never play the same dungeon in the same way twice. And they are right, but the reality is that the maps are made up of the same bland room designs that are interchangeable with each other. They're just in a different configuration. They also never considered if the enemy type makes sense in the dungeon. We got giant scorpions, boars, bugs, winged creatures, and is that a fucking chimera? In Greek mythology, it's usually depicted as a lion with the head of a goat and a tail of a snake, or a dragon in this case. And obviously it breathes fire. This is not a first dungeon creature. This is a mythical creature that you normally would build up over the course of a campaign. I ran into one on floor 1 and then on floor 2. There's 2 of them in the first dungeon. 2 chimera just hanging out with spiders and giant scorpions. Sure, why not? You can play 2-player co-op online or local, but it's a 4 out of 10. There's not much variety. The mission design is shallow, keys seem to spawn in close to the door that they open, and many quests are the same. Even for $5, it's below average in every way. Arkanoid Live. I always enjoyed Arkanoid on the NES, and the Super Nintendo version was decent. Unfortunately, Taito gave us a rather bare-bones version of the game this time. You have arcade mode and versus mode. Arcade mode gives you 62 rounds divided into 2 episodes, and these seem to be the exact same levels as the original NES and Super Nintendo versions of the game. This is actually not that much content, and you'll get through these in about 2 to 3 hours. By default, they have turned on animated backgrounds that are extremely annoying, especially when enemies are present. These are horrible, and they even have lighting effects added to them. Turn them off right away. You also have some of the worst generic techno music that I've heard in a very long time, and it gets on my nerves after a while. Arkanoid Live has that same classic gameplay, but with imprecise controls, horribly animated backgrounds, and a grating techno soundtrack. There's not much to like. 5 out of 10. It's average. Some good, some bad. For $10, it seems to be a shame that you only get 62 levels. There are 2 added DLC packs for $3 each, but it's hard to want to jump back in when the controls and the music are so disappointing. Ascend, Hand of Kull. This was a free-to-play action RPG which had some interesting ideas. It was a decent hack-and-slash experience at the time, but it was delisted only a year after release. Interest dried up quickly once you realized that you needed to pay money to keep up. This footage you see isn't mine. I had the game downloaded, as you can see here, but it can't sign into the servers after the title screen. So I couldn't capture any gameplay. So why keep talking about it? Well, developer Signal Studios announced the Steam version, which they supported until June of 2016. Outer Heaven Studios did a re-release of Ascend Hand of Kull on Steam in November of 2022, titled Ascend Reborn, so maybe check that out if you were a fan. Assassin's Creed Liberation HD. This originally came out on the PSP. Once I started playing the game, you realize that Assassin's Creed Liberation is a full-fledged Assassin's Creed game. You have fully voiced cutscenes with motion capture movements, complete with lip syncing and good quality acting. The combat works very similar to what was available at the time, so counter moves, disarming, using enemy weapons, and more. activate a synchronization point, which reveals more of the map. You still get to use the leap of faith to get down. Running and climbing seems identical to how it worked on Assassin's Creed 3. And there's also the ability to... Come on, Spillage! I can't even go through the mechanics of a game without you signing in. That's Spillage. He'll probably end up showing up quite a bit because he's the only one on my friends list that keeps playing 360 games. Well, for the most part. The notoriety system is back. There are 3 personas that you can switch between: the lady persona, the assassin persona, and the slave persona. The assassin persona has full access to all the weapons and tools, and you can freely climb structures, but it always has a notoriety of level 1, and guards will notice her given enough time. The other 2 can blend in with certain crowds. One can charm and bribe guards, but she can't climb, while the other has much more movement and can pass by guards by carrying crates to look busy. But these other 2 are also weaker in combat, being limited in what weapons they can use and certain actions. Spillage, let me at least finish Liberation HD. I literally can't use all the footage of every time you pop up, or people will think I staged it. You need all 3 personas to gain access to certain locations in the game. The story will take you about 8 hours to go through, but you could easily keep busy for around 15 some hours with other activities. You have 7 different collectibles, some of which can only be picked up by certain personas. Yikes, which is just insane. There's no reward for getting them all, so what's the point? The story is rather weak, and even though I like the voice actress, I never really felt like we got to know her or the main characters very well. There are a few charming characters, but the writing is just not on par with the main series. The game loses some of its initial excitement as you keep playing, then it becomes more about just giving the player more to do, instead of having a memorable story. The Metacritic on the consoles range from a 62 to a 64, with a user score of 5.9, and that's out of 120 ratings. So that's a pretty good swath of reviews to go by. There are many mixed critic reviews. The user reviews are a little more positive overall, but the number that left behind reviews is much lower. They originally released this game just shortly after Black Flag, where it really should have come out a few months before it to tide people over for the new game. I'm going to rate this compared to other XBLA games, which I think is a 7 out of 10. It's a good game. If you were to compare this to the retail releases in the series, I would probably bring it down to like a 5, but as far as comparing it to other XBLA games go, it's a good experience. $20 is kind of a high price to pay for what you get, but it is a solid experience, and if you're still able to buy it on the newer Xbox consoles, you might want to check it out at least a discount. Assault Heroes from Wanaco Games. The first 2 Assault Heroes games were some of the earlier best twin-stick shooters on the platform. For $10, you got about 8 hours of gameplay from the first game and 10 hours from the second. The first game gave us vehicles that have access to 3 primary weapons at all times: a minigun, flat cannon, and a flamethrower. You can switch between all of them at will, and you have unlimited ammunition, although the flamethrower will overheat after repeated use. The big selling point was the 2-player co-op, where both players share the screen online or offline. You get special weapons like grenades along with some bonus areas, and it's a fun time. The game scored around 75 to 80 across most reviews. I still give it a 6 out of 10 all these years later. It's slightly above average now. The price was reduced to $5 for each game, and the first one isn't backwards compatible, so you might want to pick it up before the 360 store closes for some good co-op fun. Assault Heroes 2. The core gameplay of Assault Heroes 2 remains to be the same as the first, but now the player has the ability to switch to enemy units at certain times, allowing you to briefly jump into a tank or a helicopter for a small amount of time. The game also features on-foot only areas that give it a little variety instead of always being in a vehicle. You still have 2-player co-op multiplayer, both online or local, and players can now link weapons for increased damage. The game doesn't have much innovation, but it does what you would expect from a sequel on XBLA. I would still give this a 7 out of 10. It's a good game with more than 10 hours of play. And since they reduced the price, you can get it for $5 now. Asteroids and Deluxe. This is a kind of confusing title, but what we got here is the original two arcade games, Asteroids from 1979 and Asteroids Deluxe from 1981. This 2007 Xbox Live Arcade port of the two games has revamped HD graphics. You get the classic version of each game, but you also get the addition of a evolved version with better graphics and particle effects for the explosion. There's also an added throttle monkey mode to both the original game and the newer evolved version, which basically amps up the speed to everything, making the gameplay way faster. But this is almost to a fault. We will see Atari publish several of these older games with evolved graphics and a throttle monkey mode. The evolved version of each looks slightly better, but the additional particle effects actually makes it hard to see incoming enemies or asteroids. This package is only $3 today, and that's not bad, but if you never grew up with these two classics, then you won't find much here. This game is a 3 out of 10 today. There are way better shooters on the platform, and ones that offer more complexity and fun. Astro Pop. This is a simple puzzle game where you match 4 of the same color, but the unique aspect has you grabbing the colors and then you can throw them back. There are special blocks that do something different when you activate them, but it's about what you expect. There's only standard mode and a survival mode. This game is a 3 out of 10. It's an okay puzzle game. But the one thing XBLA has is a number of puzzle games, and this one is below average today. For $10, there are much better alternatives. Awesome Knots. This is a good competitive 3v3 MOBA that has some nice visuals and an upgrade system that gives it some longevity. Unfortunately, the 360 version is dead, so you might want to try it on a newer system, like Xbox One, PlayStation 4, or even Steam. Xbox One got it in 2016, and others have complained about networking issues and having a small player base, so Steam might be the best alternative for some. The artwork looks good, and there's a good number of depth to the character builds. I only had a 30-minute trial, and all I could do is play against bots. I give the 360 version a 5 out of 10. I had fun, but I believe the game went free to play on PC, so that's gonna be a better option for you. Axel and Pixel. This is a point-and-click adventure about a painter and his dog. Axel and Pixel wake up in a dream. Some rat-like koala bear destroyed your house and it steals a key. Son of a bitch. Yep, this whole thing is just a dream. Once again, it's the old game designer's perfect scapegoat. Make your game take place in a dream and you don't need to follow any rules of logic or design. First thing you'll notice is the graphics. The visuals go for this photorealistic backgrounds mixed with cartoon-like characters and animals. It looks nice at first, but you'll notice that the two really don't blend together very well. The animation is also a little weak, and some of the creature designs just look bad. I'm not saying this game doesn't have some charm to it, but since it's a $10 budget game, there's no spoken voice whatsoever, only gibberish or basic noises. And the only readable text that is used is to introduce you to certain puzzles or explain the buttons for a minigame. So you're just clicking on hotspots, watching some animation, and then moving on from there. There's no narrator to add some humor, and there's no clever writing to keep you interested. There's not much of a challenge here either. You can't really die, and most chapters only require a dozen moves or less to actually complete. So just keep clicking on things and you'll graduate to the next screen. That's right, every environment is a single screen with a little bit of panning to the left and right at most. I played through the entire game and I only find it about average, 5 out of 10. You should be able to finish the story in under 3 hours, but this was also delisted a while back, so you might not be able to find it on another platform.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Have you ever walked out of a mall into a huge parking area and realized you'd forgotten where you parked your car?
Tim Plus to T.
It ain't got no gas in it.
Ah, don't hate me, 'cause I'm gorgeous, Freeman. Maybe if you got rid of that old yee-yee-ass AGV suit, you'd get some bitches on your dick.
Babel Rising, created by Mando Productions. Ubisoft's Babel Rising is the next-generation version of their popular iPhone game of the time, but now it's in 3D. This game is directly inspired by the Tower of Babel passage in Genesis. For those unfamiliar, God decides to confuse them by making them speak different languages. Since they can't properly communicate with each other, they all give up and they go home. But in this game, you play as God and you use your powers to smite every human from building the tower yourself. Throw rocks with enough force to kill them. Hurl balls of fire causing massive damage and killing humans in large groups. Then, when you've smited enough builders to charge up your ultimate power, unleash massive devastation. And you're not just knocking them out, you are actually killing them. They fall over dead and they have a little spirit pop out as they ascend to heaven. And you know what? It's actually kind of fun. Bonking them out with rocks has a satisfying sound effect. You can hold down a button to rip up the ground underneath, while the other firepower lets you create a wall of flame to block their path. You get a few more elemental powers as you go on, like whirlwinds and floods. Babel Rising has an interesting concept that might wear thin as you keep playing, but alas, I can't find that out for myself because it's been delisted. And it's a shame because there is local competitive and local cooperative multiplayer modes, just no online play. I like this one, 6 out of 10, above average. It was delisted only 2.5 years after release, even on Steam. You can't find it on any console or even on Android, iOS, or the Windows Store. The series sold 3.5 million altogether, but you can't find it anywhere? It was probably delisted due to an expiring publishing agreement between Mando Productions and Ubisoft. And no, it's a different kind of Mando, not the one you're thinking of.
Ah, Mando!
Backbreaker Vengeance. In 2009, Natural Motion released its first game, the iPhone game titled Backbreaker Football, which used their Morphine animation package to simulate movement and tackles. The game was a critical and commercial success with 5 million downloads. They used this as a starting point and they put together a full retail release of Backbreaker Football. No NFL license, obviously, but still using 56 full-size teams with fictional stadiums, players, and a lot of customization. You could create your own teams, logos, and even design your own end zone. You had 2 different franchise-style modes, a career mode and the Road to Backbreaker mode, and Tackle Alley, where you had 100 challenges to beat. The game was middle of the road for most, scoring a lot of 5s and 6s. So the retail Backbreaker game was a total failure, right? Well, no, it used the Euphoria game engine, which determines animations dynamically rather than depending on canned animations. Most didn't like the fact that there was no NFL license, but that didn't really matter for Natural Motion, where their main idea was to prove that their tech worked and commercialize their procedural animation technology. Before you knew it, it was announced that Grand Theft Auto 4 was going to use the Euphoria game engine. And then the floodgates opened. Rockstar Games used the engine in Red Dead Redemption, Max Payne 3, and Red Dead Redemption 2. A year after Backbreaker arrived at retail stores, they released Backbreaker Vengeance as a digital-only arcade version on consoles. If you were expecting 11-on-11 regulation football, you're not going to find it here. Go track down a retail version of Backbreaker. Vengeance is meant to be a stripped-down version made for XBLA and the PSN store. You have 3 modes, Tackle Alley, Vengeance, and Supremacy. Each mode has 20 challenges made of 5 courses each, giving you 300 total drills to complete. Tackle Alley is basically the same version you saw on mobile devices. You guide a running back through defenses to score a touchdown. In Vengeance mode, you switch sides, now taking control of the defensive back trying to stop the offense from scoring. And in Supremacy mode, you get even more insane challenges to complete. Each mode slowly introduces you to more moves like jumping, spinning, and juking. The game shows you different scoring zones and ways to rack up even more points and climb those leaderboards. It's fun, with every win or failure being shown in a replay. Dodging multiple opponents and then showboating across the line just feels awesome. The animations are good, but for $15, it does seem a bit high for what you get. And now that the 360 store is closing 10 plus years later, the price hasn't changed. It gets a 5 out of 10. It's just a collection of minigames that will keep you busy for a little bit, but after a while, you really just want to play a full game of football. Best when played in short bursts. Ryan McCaffrey from the official Xbox magazine gave it a low 3.5. And yes, the same Ryan McCaffrey that would end up moving on to IGN later. It's up to you if you want to buy it before the 360 store closes and goes away for good. Natural Motion, well, they did well for themselves. In January of 2014, they were acquired by Zynga for $526 million US. Their main technology products are Endorphin for the film industry and Euphoria for the gaming industry. Band of Bugs. This was one of the few turn-based tactical RPGs at the time, which was around 2007. Band of Bugs was one of those interesting games that featured using your 360 avatar as a playable character. I decided to use my most fitting outfit for doing battle with bugs. It's my own My Little Pony outfit. Yes, I actually bought this back then. The animations in the game are basic, the bugs speak in gibberish, but that was kind of standard back then for smaller budget arcade games. But for some reason my avatar sounds more Japanese, I think. I mean, clearly it can't be real Japanese, but it sure does sound similar. The visuals look very basic with lower polygon counts and simple textures. Maps are done in your standard grid format, and they're relatively small considering the genre. But don't forget, this game was made back when the arcade games had a 50 megabyte size limit. Yeah, that's right, 50 megabytes, not gigabytes. When you think about that, that's kind of impressive. This is made for a younger crowd as well. It's the kind of RPG where your teammates don't die, they're just out, and you'll see them later. The combat isn't very deep, but you do have ranged attacks, magic, and items or spells that give you defensive or offensive boosts. Many missions change up your objectives, requiring you to do a variety of actions like reach a certain point, capture something, or defend a wall. It's nice they change things up, and the AI will come after you hard sometimes. They often try to get behind you to do the most damage, or they block the path in front of you, requiring you to kill them in order to proceed. The campaign will probably take you a little over 5 hours, but you also have some standalone missions, as well as 5 unique multiplayer modes, like Escape and Capture. Many of these support up to 4 players over online or 2 players locally. This is a backwards compatible game, so as long as you know a few people that have this game, the online should still work. The game has 50 levels altogether, but also features a level editor so you can design your own custom scenarios and play them out solo over Xbox Live or with your friends. The amount of space that you're given is kinda small, and the process of creating your own map is a bit arduous, but it works. Band of Bugs is very simple, but it will offer you some challenge if you're looking for it. There's a good amount of content, and using your avatar is always fun. 6 out of 10. It's basic, but it can still be fun for $10. Since it is backwards compatible, you can also find the main game and all of its DLC still available today, adding even more campaigns and additional tile sets to be used in the level editor. Bangayao HD Missile Fury from Treasure. This is an absolutely insane action game. This is a lesser-known title from developer Treasure, the renowned Japanese company responsible for several landmark shooters during their time, which wasn't helped when it was also delisted on XBLA in early of 2021. This is an addicting arcade shooter that combines fast action with puzzle elements and a sensory overload of hundreds of missiles on screen at one time. The gameplay is downright ridiculous, one of the most screen-cluttering shooters of its time. But man, you could find yourself locked in a corner very easily. Death comes quick and fast, so you really need to plan out your attack. The game can seem overwhelming at first, but after a bit of playing, you start to kind of learn how it works. The Metacritic score is a 77 with generally favorable reviews. Critic and user reviews both agree this is a fantastic shooter for the asking price. Even though it takes time to learn how to progress properly, it never seems like it's designed to be unfair. I give it an 8 out of 10. It's a great game that's designed well, but it's not for everybody. I hope it gets released again, maybe in a new collection of games from Treasure. It's got a lot of challenge, and being able to share levels with others would be awesome once again. It even has co-op play. Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie still holds up today as one of the finest 3D platformers of all time. You have solid level design, a number of moves to learn, a unique transformation mechanic that keeps having surprises as the game goes on, and there's just a level of lovable charm in the writing and the art design that still shines through today. Over the years, some people have stated that they like this game more than Super Mario 64, and that's some high praise. This XBLA release is also one of the best versions of Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie over the original N64 ones. They made several improvements, such as not having to recollect all the notes upon every death, and certain sections that had known problems have been made easier. Longtime fans will also love finally being able to unlock the stop and swap features that were originally planned for the N64 release but never officially worked. There's even content that you can unlock in the newer Nuts and Bolts game. There are a few flaws, like they never really remastered the visuals nor the controls for either Banjo game. The low-res textures are nostalgic for some, but others see it as an eyesore. The camera is rather unwieldy at times, and there are still a few more issues that could use some fixes. The Bear and Bird duo were a masterpiece for its time, and despite a few faults, it still has an amazing soundtrack. It's still a good game that anybody can pick up, a 7 out of 10. Both games are backwards compatible on newer Xbox consoles. Some of you might wonder about the version that you get from Rare Replay. You can see here I have two versions of Banjo-Kazooie, the original digital release and the one that you get when you buy Rare Replay. You might think, oh, maybe the Rare Replay version works better with achievement tracking when you switch back to Rare Replay, but no, they're the same game. It's just to let the owner know that they got their copy from Rare Replay. If you go into each title, the total size of the file is the same, and the version number of each game is exactly the same as well. You don't need to keep both on your hard drive. Banjo-Tooie. This is the sequel to the original, and it holds up rather well. Many consider this to be an improvement over the original Banjo-Kazooie in every way. The level design is still superb. You have more new moves to learn. The transformation mechanic keeps things interesting at every step. The worlds are bigger, there are more characters to help along the way, more jiggies to collect, and more content overall. The first game would take most players about 10 to 12 hours to finish, but now you got a solid 15 to 20 hours if you want to collect everything. The charm and the art design is still here with cute and memorable characters, the writing is still well done, and the quiz show parts are back. For returning players, you will find more content, more moves, and more puzzles to figure out. This sequel is definitely more challenging than the first one, so returning fans will find more to do. I have heard that some players that never played this game when it first came out find Banjo-Tooie difficult to play. I will admit that the controls have some issues at times, especially the first-person shooter sections. I still find this game an improvement over the original, and even though there are some technical issues, I give it an 8 out of 10. It's still a great game after all these years, but I understand that many newer gamers just might not like the way this game plays compared to the newer platform games. Bankshot Billiards 2. This has been a longtime favorite for XBLA fans. It was a fun game with several modes, full online support, and some rather good ball physics for being an arcade title. Its ultimate sales figures are unknown, but it did move 500,000 units by February 2009, and it has remained in the top 50 bestsellers even today. It improves upon the original with 9 different game styles, 90 trick shots to complete, and 36 holes in the golf mode. It's a good 6+ hours of content altogether. It was a solid experience for many years, but it's amazing that we are getting close to this game being nearly 20 years old at this video's release. It's a 5 out of 10. It's fun for what it was, but you can find better physics on newer consoles. I got all the achievements many years ago, but it feels a bit average today. Bastion. Indie developer Supergiant Games made a name for itself when they released a top-down action RPG called Bastion, best known for its lush and colorful art style, and the constant reactive narration throughout the game.
He gets up, sets off for the Bastion, where everyone agreed to go in case of trouble.
You get a stellar game with nice animations and a decent story. Don't feel bad if you didn't buy this on the 360 or the PlayStation 3 at the time before the stores closed down, because you can find it on many newer platforms. Sorry, I'm not going to go into more detail, but you really don't get to play that much of the trial. I've only heard good things about the game, 8 out of 10. One of the best titles on XBLA. It's a great adventure and well worth the full price, but I've seen it go down to $5 or even $3 on GOG during their summer sale, like this one from June of 2023. Definitely worth a purchase.
More squirts start coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, you see why I don't go in order from what they show in my games? This is a Batman game, but they list it under Blackgate Deluxe Edition. So you could have just paid $20 for this in the store, and then you come to your games and you're like, hey, where's Batman at? Granted, the only reason I need to scroll is because I've got every other arcade game in the store in this list. The full title is Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate Deluxe Edition. This is a 2.5D side-scrolling platformer developed by Armature Studio. And no, I didn't say amateur studio, let's be adult about this. It's not that highly rated, but I mean, come on, guys. They were tasked with bringing the Batman Arkham experience for the first time to handheld systems, which were the Nintendo 3DS and the PlayStation Vita. Only 6 months later, the consoles and PC got an HD version called the Deluxe Edition. We see a lot of mixed reviews for the game, with aggregating review website Metacritic giving most versions a 60 to a 62 for a score. For a game released on April 1st, the joke seems to be on us. Yes, that's right. The game came out on April Fool's, not a great day to pick. The game takes place 3 months after the console version of Batman Arkham Origins and has you trying to recapture Black Mask, Penguin, and the Joker. The animated cutscenes have limited motion and no lip sync, which is fine for a handheld or arcade game. But they can use some awkward angles and they aren't very dynamic considering they look like a comic book. The story isn't bad, but it uses a very basic setup and it's not very memorable. The gameplay is strictly 2D, you can only move left or right, but the game uses 3D environments to kind of hide this, having you grapple into the background or move around a 3D structure, even though your movement is still limited to left and right. You are going to see several elements from the Batman Arkham series from Rocksteady. You have detective mode, where you can scan objects for more info, you can grapple on top of statues, glide kick into enemies, and find new upgrades. All of these elements had to be completely recreated for this game, so no existing code was used. The combat is also reminiscent of the other Arkham games, but now everything is done on a 2D plane. You got takedowns, counterattacks, basic attacks, and you use the cape to stun. But since they had to recreate all these elements and build the combat themselves, it never quite feels as fluid as it was on the big console releases. It looks decent, but there are several problems with it that will end up getting you killed often, like not being able to aim your attack at the intended target, or the evade button not even registering presses sometimes. The stun doesn't always work either, and it took me some time before I realized it's because Batman doesn't lunge forward like he does in other games when he uses it. He just does it from a standing position only. It's hard to get into a flow when fighting because of this, plus trying to counter doesn't seem to prioritize knife-wielding or heavy armor enemies in a crowd. Combat is frustrating, and sometimes it's going to take several button presses before your stun or evade or your counter is going to even register. I also had difficulty in navigating the facility due to not being able to see additional ways to proceed. See, you have destructible walls and floors like in the other games, but you cannot see these without using detective mode. You might come to a dead end, but you won't know that there's a weakened wall until you use your scanner. I also got very frustrated when I couldn't interact with a background element that seemed like it should be obvious to do. Like this object here. I tried to grapple to it or rip it from its hinges from several different angles, but it was only after I activated my scanner and spent several seconds highlighting it and scanning it that I could finally activate it. This sucks, and having to ask the player to constantly stop and use the scanner on every single room once they get stuck is an arduous process that grinds any fun that they were having to a halt. And you need to keep scanning items and walls throughout the game, even hours after the game first tells you about explosive gel or pulling down a wall. Every interaction seemingly needs to be scanned and analyzed first before you can actually do it. The map can be a little confusing to navigate as well since you're moving around a 3D representation of an environment, but you can only move left and right, and sometimes this doesn't always translate to left or right on the map. It's a 6 out of 10. This $20 game is high priced and it has a lot of frustrating aspects to it. It's still unique and it will give you about 8 hours of gameplay, but it's not backwards compatible, so the 360 might be the only console version available to you. If you're still thinking about getting this after the 360 store closes, then know that the Wii U version is the only console version that is displayed at 1080p and 60 frames per second. Both the 360 and PlayStation 3 run at 720p and only 30 frames. The Steam version can obviously also do 1080p at 60 frames, since that one is probably easier to get a hold of than the Wii U one. It might only be above average, but Steam might be a better option for you if you want the best looking version of this game. Batman, the Telltale series. Ah, the Telltale games. I own all the more recent console games from their library, but I don't have the 360 versions for some. I decided to not go into great detail about the adventure-style Telltale games on XBLA. I might go back and cover all the Telltale games in more detail with a separate video, but for now I will be doing a quick overview and give them a rating, since I have played through all of them except for one. I had to trim down some of this content in order to get through these videos before the 360 store was going to be shut down. In Batman the Telltale series, we have a decent game. The animations are better and there's more effort put into them than some of the earlier work. It's a little more interactive than some of the other stories as well. It deserves a 7 out of 10, I just thought the story got idiotic toward the end. Without giving anything away, they basically hide the identity of one of the villains, and though it is a recognizable character in the Batman universe, it's really one that has no business being the antagonist. It kinda ruined it for me, but maybe you'll like it. Battle Academy. From developer Slytherin. Wait, Slytherin? Slytherin, like Harry Potter? Slytherin? I don't know, it's pretty dang close. This is a turn-based strategy game that is rather deep, includes multiplayer, and has 30-plus battles across a range of theaters of war. This is part of a series of primarily 2 main games. It originally started out as being based on a 2004 BBC browser Flash game. The first main game came out on Windows in 2010, and this is the game that is used for the XBLA version. Don't feel bad if you've never heard of this on XBLA, it didn't come out until December of 2014. A year after the Xbox One came out. The visuals have a realistic comic style to them. This is a hard game for me to rate. The Metacritic section I looked at didn't have critic scores for the PC, iOS, and the XBLA versions, and only a handful of reviews were left behind across all versions. The trial only gave me access to the tutorial, so it doesn't seem fair for me to give this a low score just because I couldn't get into it. I really didn't like the animations from what I saw. Other reviewers say that there is a lot of variety to the missions, and apparently it's well designed for hardcore wargamers. I give it a 6 out of 10. I wouldn't mind giving this game more of a shot, but it's hard for me to get past the rather steep price for the complete game. $30 US on XBLA. On PC or iOS, apparently it's only $20, so maybe that's a better option for some. BattleBlock Theater. Your friends have been captured and forced to perform for an audience of cats. So it's up to you to rescue them from developer The Behemoth, the same ones that created Alien Hominid and the phenomenal Castle Crashers. We have an action platformer where you gather crystals and you must make it to the end, but there are surprises and devilish traps along the way. It's meant to be challenging, but it's also designed with all different kinds of players in mind. Damn, I love this art style. You have an energetic narrator that tries to help but often just makes fun of you during the process. It's often hilarious, especially the puppet shows at the end of the chapter. The controls are tight and responsive, just like you would expect for a demanding platformer. Some aspects wear thin as you keep going, but it seems like the design team tried to keep things fresh the best they could. There's even 4-player co-op and a level editor, which means you'll find plenty of community content. For $15, it is a much better package than Alien Hominid, being way more approachable for all ages. 8 out of 10. Castle Crashers is still their finest work to date, but this was a great note to leave the Xbox 360 on. It's one of the best XBLA titles. It sold 5.1 million copies from the last report that we know of. Battlefield 1943. At the time, this took players back to World War II in a standalone digital-only download. Console players got a stripped-down version of the previous World War II PC title, and we loved it. We got 24-player multiplayer over 3 classic locations, Wake Island, Guadalcanal, and Iwo Jima, with an additional map unlocked later, Coral Sea. There was only one mode, Conquest. You only had 3 character classes, Rifleman, Infantry, and Scout. They had a fixed loadout, and there was no ammo boxes or health crates. Your specialized ammo would replenish over time, like rockets and grenades, and even your health would regenerate given enough time. There was no player progression or equipment to unlock. You had everything you needed, just unlocked from the beginning. They did cut some corners, but nobody cared. It was only $15, and it was a blast to play. It was 2009, and Battlefield 3 was just a little ways away, so having this was a nice little fix. It was just so satisfying to take out an enemy sniper with a bombing run, or to get that final headshot to register with your sniper rifle, only to be shot by a plane a split second later. Taking out tanks, flying planes, it was just so much fun back then. 7 out of 10. Compared to what was out there at the time, this was still a good game, and it lasted longer than we all thought. It sold just over 1.1 million after only a year and a half, which was December 2010. Unfortunately, the bad news finally came when it was announced that the game would be delisted from digital storefronts on April 28th of 2023, along with Bad Company 1 and 2. Servers for Battlefield 1943 would be shut down on December 8th of 2023. The game will be no longer playable, which has angered some fans. I played a good amount while getting some footage for this video, and I came to a conclusion. For a digital-only multiplayer game that lasted nearly 14 years being active, I'm actually okay with this. The game is fun, don't get me wrong, but it plays rough. It was great back in 2009, but today we have Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, so we can go back to World War I and World War II whenever we want. It was harder finding full rooms as I was playing to record footage, so maybe it's time to finally say goodbye to an old friend. Battle Los Angeles, dear Lord, this. Oh, okay. Hey kids, you want to play a movie licensed game whose Metacritic score is only 2 points higher than the movie itself? Yep, a solid 39, while the movie only got a 37. Relive the movie as you assume the role of a Marine under the leadership of Staff Sergeant Nance. Was that his name? The guy played by Aaron Eckhart in the movie. You get to fight alongside characters from the film and defend the city of Los Angeles. The game throws you into the first battle scene of the movie. Really? Right bumper reloads? Throw grenades with B? What the hell does X do? Oh, nothing, of course. Textures are basic. The reload animation for the M16 takes up half the screen. Look how fast you swing this rifle around as you put a new magazine in and load a round in. This is an 8-pound weapon. I've handled one before. You can't flip it up and around this fast in real life. It's physically impossible or you're gonna break your wrist. An FOV slider doesn't exist. It must internally be set to something like 50. This is way too close. Oh man, this game moves harsh too. I didn't even know there was aim assist, so I was trying to aim with the default controls in most of the footage that you're gonna see. Once I actually did use aim assist in the game, it felt like I was cheating by betting on a football game that happened last week. That character looks a little like Michelle Rodriguez, like in the cheeks? Why does it look like her? That's not her voice. Is it supposed to be her? Oh shit, I actually forgot she was in the movie. That really is supposed to be her. As you would probably guess, Battle Los Angeles got generally negative reviews. You can beat it in under an hour, but to get all the achievements, you need to beat it on all 3 difficulties. I wanted to buy this to make more fun of it, but it was delisted before I knew it. So, sorry, I just got the trial. This is a 2 out of 10 for me. A $10 movie licensed game that you can beat in about 45 minutes is embarrassing. The review for Cheat Code Central literally says they beat the game in a little over 30 minutes. Just why, Konami? You used to be cool, man. What happened to you?
What happened to you, man? Used to be cool.
I'm still cool.
Nah, you've changed, man.
Battlestar Galactica. This is your standard 2.5D action space shooter. The entire game takes place on a flat plane. You can't move up or down. It's your basic top-down space shooter like Asteroids, but they angled the camera just slightly so they could make it look like it was all in 3D. A nice feature is that your ship has inertia, so it will continue in the last direction that you accelerated in. If you're getting shot from behind, you can just let go of the accelerator and spin around and fire behind you while you continue going forward. It can be a little fun boosting around a corner and blasting Cylons. You can sometimes see the Galactica off in the distance down below, like during a certain mission, and the gameplay can be a little fun, but ultimately it's boring and there's not much challenge to it. For single player, you have the campaign, which consists of 10 maps, and you can beat it all in about an hour, even on the hard difficulty. I bought this back then, but the online modes were dead shortly after release. You can play matches with up to 16 AI bots, and it might look interesting, but there's only 2 types of power-ups, so it gets real tedious. The gun sound might be cool, but it's probably the only thing that made me smile. Official Xbox magazine scored it a 5.0, saying there's not much content or challenge. Nowadays, I would give this a 3 out of 10. This game was average when it came out, and now we're approaching it being 17 years old. This game got delisted for a reason. Play Battlestar Galactica Deadlock instead. Battlezone. The original 1980s sci-fi tank shooter is back. This is similar to the other Atari releases around this time. The game has 2 modes, Classic and Evolved, along with your standard Throttle Monkey version for each. Classic recreates the look of the original arcade, Evolved mode plays the same, but the visuals have been restylized to look more modern. You might think that for $4 US that this would be a good price for a limited game like this. This was once cutting-edge technology in the arcades, and I can appreciate the original, but the controls are sluggish and you can't move in one direction while you aim in another. That's how the game was designed. If you're looking at the enemy and they fire, you need to take your crosshair off the enemy and accelerate in order to avoid getting hit. But the enemy can just keep you in their crosshairs and fire again. All you do is continually fire at tanks and the occasional saucer, and that's pretty much the game. Throttle Monkey for Classic makes you move at max speed, but enemy tanks can spawn off to the sides and kill you fast. Evolved mode simply has improved graphics, but it plays the same. In 2008, this was interesting to play, kind of a curiosity, but now there's very little value today unless you're nostalgic for this game. That's why it gets a 3 out of 10. There are a few multiplayer options and it's perfectly playable, but it gets boring rather quickly once you realize it's all about a high score. The Metacritic score is only a 50 with no user score. Official Xbox magazine gave it a 3.0 and called it pointless. Nobody cares about this one, apparently. Battlezone Gold Edition. You might be wondering about the other version of Battlezone on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One from 2016. And in the fairness of being complete, well, let's take a look at it. In July 2013, British developer Rebellion bought the rights to Battlezone from Atari, and in 2016 they released Battlezone 98 Redo on PC, a remastered version of the 1998 game originally developed by Activision. This new version was developed by Big Boat Interactive, and they made a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One version. 2 years later, they released Battlezone Gold Edition, which had all the DLC included, and this is the version I'm looking at. This reboot of the 1998 game is definitely a great interpretation, combining a first-person shooter with real-time strategy. Blast enemy tanks while capturing certain areas. In between missions, there's also an overhead map where you can plan out your route. Route? I don't know which one's right. You have a number of weapons to use, and they all seem useful in some way. When playing single player, the game can get frustrating after a while since the AI prefers to swarm you with large numbers of enemies. The game does try to constantly introduce new weapons, objectives, and weapons to you at a decent pace. This new Battlezone is a lot of fun, with way more depth and things to unlock than the XBLA version. It did first release in 2016, but I think the aesthetic still holds up well. 7 out of 10. It's a good game for its time. They had a nice balance of being more realistic, but still maintaining a computer wireframe or Tron-like design. The online servers are empty, but multiplayer is an option if you know others that own the game.
Congratulations.
Beaten Groovy. This is probably one of the worst rhythm games around for its time. It feels cheap, the artwork on the main menu is so bland and generic that I don't think a modern publisher would ever release a game like this today. These characters are lifeless, and their animations could have been done in an afternoon. The Metacritic score is a dismal 29 with a user score of 3.2. It's a 2 out of 10 for me. The limited soundtrack of just 9 songs is weak. Considering this is published by Konami, this is an embarrassment. Bejeweled 2. This is actually Bejeweled 2 Deluxe, which brings the classic puzzle game to the Xbox 360, but it doesn't make too many changes. But this really isn't my kind of game. When I think of boring match 3 gems type of puzzle game, Bejeweled is usually one of the first ones I think about. This is the classic game of gem swapping, and puzzle mode seems interesting where you need to clear the board and requires some planning, but it's average for me, a 5 out of 10. This is a popular series, I recognize that, but this was also a launch title for the console back in 2005, so it's nearly 20 years old.
No more moves.
Bejeweled Blitz Live. This version came out in early of 2011, with Bejeweled 3 following later the same year. This version has a number of good reviews, a number of 7s and 8s, but I hate this one the most. Look, I already said it, I don't like Bejeweled. I played the trial, it has some good review scores, but I personally do not care for these types of puzzle games. Official Xbox Magazine gave this an 8.0, so maybe listen to them. It's a 4 out of 10 for me. It feels below average. Bejeweled 3. The biggest, brightest Bejeweled ever. You got 8 game modes to try. Classic Bejeweled, quest puzzles, lightning for non-stop action, and Zen for a new way to relax. Bejeweled 3 definitely feels like an upgrade with more ways to match, more gems to make, and it's a bit more exciting to play. For me, it's my highest rating that I've given to a Bejeweled game so far, 6 out of 10. This one is more tolerable for a non-puzzle fan. Official Xbox Magazine gave this version a 8.0, so go ahead and trust them instead.
Level complete.
Bellator MMA Onslaught. Onslaught is an arcade-style fighting game based on the Bellator Mixed Martial Arts Tournament organization. This game was kind of an introduction to this relatively new fighting league at the time, which would go on to become the second largest in the United States and one of the largest combat sports promotions in the world. It looks interesting, but the scores at the time were slightly above average at best, like this 6.0 from the official Xbox magazine. Dave Rudden mentions that the submission system was broken and there isn't enough fighters. The trial lets you play as 2 fighters and you can create a fighter and rank him up to level 3 max. So I did that, introducing 2 Dick Dalton. That's right, the man's so vain that he wants people to think, does he actually have 2 dicks? Oh, and he has green on his front because I colored his chest hair green, not because he has gangrene. I ranked him up, increased his striking ability, and got decimated. Don't grab me! Fight like a man! I didn't train for this! No fair! Don't punch me in the back of the head! That's uncalled for! And it happened at least twice. Alright, here we go. More grabbing? Stop getting on top of me! Oh, this reminds me of my wedding night. Yes, honey, I know, I'm a loser. I'll get you some ice cream. It's like they know I didn't train my grappling or submission at all. And boom goes the dynamite. Dear Lord. But I finally got him. Take these checks and cash them. You've just been overdrawn. Wait, you don't cash them, you need to deposit them. Wait, cash them but give me the money. Yeah, bend it over like that Beckham guy. Thankfully you can't just button mash to win. I was purposely trying to brute force my way to a victory, but the game did punish me for that. Even though I had some fun, the fighting is relatively bland, and you can find cheat moves that the AI isn't good against quite often. The animations are bad, the number of moves is limited, the game includes only 8 fighters in 2 divisions, and there's really no career mode. Yes, you can rank up your fighter doing activities, but it's not structured as a story with calendar events or as progression through a season. This is a first effort, and they made more games, but $15 at release was a bit much. This was reduced to only $10, but I don't see a reason to buy this. It's a 4 out of 10 today. There's not much to do, and it feels like an unfinished idea.
Grab his dick and twist it! Twist his dick! Twist his dick! Oh my god. Oh, dick twist!
Beyond Good and Evil HD. The original Beyond Good and Evil broke new ground when it came to traditional action-adventure games when it released back in 2003 on PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. The critics agreed it was something special back then, but all that positive reception didn't deliver very good sales. It was also up against some heavy competition at the time, and it actually became a commercial failure. Ubisoft decided to bring it back in 2011 with improvements and new HD visuals, and for only $10 US. This was one of the absolute joys of XBLA, a re-release of a AAA game from a previous console that just never saw much success or wide enough appeal back in its day. Now we get to experience the entire game for a very low price.
Save Slot 3, listen, real fact here. If you don't play on Save Slot 3, you're part of ISIS. I'll say it.
You played as Jade, an investigative reporter and martial artist, naturally. It was your typical action game, but it also had a mix of puzzle solving and stealth-based gameplay. You used your camera as an interesting mechanic to obtain photographic evidence. There's a certain amount of charm to the character designs and the game overall. There is a lot of voice work, and the new HD visuals are a nice upgrade. It starts out a little slow, but you're looking at a good 10 to 14 hours depending on how much you want to do. The music is beautiful, and there are new things to see and do around most corners. The Metacritic score sits at an 84, and both the critic and user reviews are extremely favorable. Out of 57 of the critic reviews, 52 of them are positive, so this is an easy 8 out of 10 for me. A fantastic version to play. Today, more than 10 years after this remastered release, the mechanics are not as groundbreaking as they once were. The camera tends to have issues, and the control scheme takes some getting used to. But considering that fans have been looking forward to a sequel ever since it was teased with a trailer at the Ubi Days event in 2008, some think that it will never surface. Beyond Good and Evil HD sold well, but as of 2022, we've been waiting for the planned sequel Beyond Good and Evil 2, now for longer than Duke Nukem Forever, which has been more than 15 years. Check out this game on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, or even through backwards compatibility on Xbox One. Big Bumpin', one of the Burger King games. In October of 2006, Burger King officially announced a campaign that was going to offer 3 video games made for the Xbox and Xbox 360. That holiday season, you could pick up and buy all 3 games for $3.99 each with the purchase of any value meal. They were available from November 19th through December 24th in 2006. And the Xbox 360 version also supported achievements. Big Bumpin' is the first one that we are checking out, and it easily is the weakest out of all 3 Burger King games. In this game, the usual lineup of BK mascots go at each other in bumper cars. The game uses a nice theme park aesthetic and throws in some power-ups and hazards like saws and bottomless pits. Pick your bumper car, then your character from favorites like Whopper Jr., Brooke Burke, The King, and S-Chicken. It's a nice bit of variety, but the control is way too slippery. You have 5 tournaments to complete, but you can play any one of the locations or games whenever you want. This is the hardest out of all the games as well, because the minigames often end up being 3 against 1, since the AI tends to fight you all at once. This is a 3 out of 10. Some of the designs and some of the music isn't bad, but the only fun to be really had in the multiplayer is against other people. I enjoyed the live-action footage used on the main menu. It just looks silly. The developer, Blitz Games, was making a number of games based on licensed properties for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, original Xbox, and the GBA and DS. And they were the ones that made the god-awful Bad Boys Miami Takedown. Bionic Commando Rearmed. This is one of those prime examples of what Microsoft wanted XBLA to be. A place where an old classic could return, but in a 2.5D side-scrolling action game with new visuals and a reworked soundtrack for a budget price. Bionic Commando was a much-loved NES game from 1988 that saw a few handheld releases, but never saw any direct sequels for over 2 decades. Then developer Grin brought it back with this remake of the original 8-bit game, keeping the spirit of the original but making some much-needed changes and improvements. You still can't jump, and all the levels and platforms are exactly the same as the original. You travel to the different locations on the map, entering whichever one you want, but many times you need a specific power-up or weapon in order to gain access to them. The final boss has now been turned into a series of levels where you disable certain parts of it, one by one. This is a lot of fun, and the game also came with extra modes like 50 challenge rooms to test your skills. Plus, you have 2-player co-op and a 4-player multiplayer mode that can be kind of intense. This was a lot of value, all for a $10 US price. I had beat the game previously, but when I went back into it for this video, they had an update that apparently added several difficulty changes. Like now on the lower difficulties, they have these clear help blocks that I don't remember them being there when I beat the game before. It's definitely a little more friendly now. The Metacritic is a high 85 with a massive amount of positive reviews from both critics and users. And it would do impressive enough numbers for Grin Studios to develop a big-budget retail sequel. That would end up flopping so hard the studio would close down later that same year. This game though, 8 out of 10. It's a shame this title isn't backwards compatible on the Xbox One, but that might be due to developer Grin closing down. Buy this game as soon as you can before the 360 store closes, because there's only a few places where you can find a legit copy. Bionic Commando Rearmed 2. Developer Fat Shark picks up the reins for this sequel, Bionic Commando Rearmed 2, and boy, it turned out to be kind of underwhelming. Fat Shark might seem a little familiar. They would go on to release the Warhammer Vermintide series, which turned out good, but before that, they made Bionic Commando Rearmed 2 and the abysmal Escape Dead Island. Rearmed 2 mostly received mixed reviews with a Metacritic score of 62 and a user score not too far off. The PlayStation 3 version has scores that are nearly identical. On paper, Fat Shark seemed to have made a lot of good design choices. The map screen is reminiscent of the first game, but levels are now presented linear. You can still go back to previously played levels, and you can use new equipment to unlock additional paths or areas. The bionic arm is meant to be more dynamic and useful, and I actually like the ability to jump now. I thought it was silly that I couldn't jump small gaps or I couldn't jump over a waist-high box or barrel. The first Rearmed was a great version of the original game, so I'm all for a sequel that moves things forward in order to make a better game. But the execution falls a little flat in the end. Navigating the stages is not fun and even becomes difficult at times. The bionic arm seems to require way too much precision in order for it to latch onto ledges. I thought it was because I was new to the game, but the controls are just too rigid. There's no auto adjustment when trying to grab ledges while jumping or being in the air. There is a set length and you can't even be slightly off in your aim for the most part. You'll die several times because there's just no way to adjust where you're aiming with the bionic arm. And you'll end up flinging yourself into pits. It should be easy to swing on lampposts and other objects. The stages have lots of hidden things, but the level design itself isn't very good. You'll occasionally run into a dead end, and you might even die trying to grab something that you're not meant to. The regular enemies don't really pose a threat for the most part, but the worst is that you can't move the camera up and down to see what lies ahead. You need to jump off ledges without often knowing where the ground is. Many platformers let you move the camera slightly to see if a ledge is just slightly out of range. We do have more detailed character models with some better designs and more vibrant colors. The bosses work well, the animations look good, and you unlock a nice number of weapons and gadgets throughout the game. When you complete a mission, it shows just how many upgrades were available and which ones you grabbed, along with the extra life and any collectibles, which is really nice to see in case you missed something. Getting the extra life on a mission actually permanently adds to your overall lives, giving you more chances to beat a particular mission, which makes hunting them down worth it. You can see that my lives here are 6, where the game starts you with 3. I had some fun with Bionic Commando Rearmed 2, but it definitely feels a bit uninspired this time around. You're still looking at 20-some hours to do everything, but it's a 6 out of 10. This title is backwards compatible on the Xbox One, and Capcom puts it on sale quite often. But despite all this, all is forgiven for Fat Shark and their earlier games because of their work on the Warhammer Vermintide series and their newest entry in the 40K universe, Darktide. They found what they were good at, so here's to them. Black Knight Sword. This is a 2D side-scrolling action platformer from the development house of Goichi Suda, also known as Suda51, who started Grasshopper Manufacture, and was also co-developed by Digital Reality. Suda51 garnered mainstream public attention with Killer 7, followed by No More Heroes on the Wii, and he was also involved with the writing and planning for Shadows of the Damned, Lollipop Chainsaw, and now Black Knight Sword. This game is one of 2 collaborations between the 2 teams, the other being Sin Mora, which we will cover much later. The visuals look a bit odd the first time you see them in motion. Digital Reality has described them as Monty Python meets Czech animation meets Japanese paper theater. The presentation makes it look like a stage play with the sets and backgrounds looking like they're made of wood and suspended on wires. Many critics like the aesthetic and the art direction. I think it's fine, but the gameplay itself is a little hard to get into. The jumping mechanic makes it tricky to land on small platforms and you drop very fast. I normally would have passed by this game if it wasn't for Suda51 being involved. There are a lot of nice touches spread around, not to mention some things hidden in the background like little animations and possibly nods to other games. It's little things like the game using hearts as currency, like in Castlevania, but in this game they look like real human hearts. That's kind of funny. Greg Miller. The store is actually this big creature with multiple mouths, and when you buy an item, it devours all of your hearts. The combat isn't too involved, you unlock a few new moves as you play, but the chapters have memorable little moments in them. It's not a very long game, you can beat it in about 3 to 4 hours depending on difficulty, but it is known for being tough and there are additional modes that you can play, so add another 2 hours overall if you want to do everything. Black Knight Sword has a number of mixed reviews, with most being around a 5 or a 6 back when it was released. Cameron Lewis from Official Xbox Magazine gave it a 7.0 and mentions that while the presentation is vivid and wildly imaginative, the actual gameplay is surprisingly ordinary. I still give it a 6 out of 10, above average. It did go on sale on the 360 while I was watching for discounts, so you might be able to get it for less than $10. It's not backwards compatible, unfortunately, so it might be a game to get before the Xbox 360 store closes if you like what you see. Blacklight Tango Down. Developer Zombie Studios was proclaiming that their new first-person shooter was going to come to Xbox Live Arcade and be a retail quality experience for just $15 US. We all knew that there was absolutely no way they could compete with a full-price retail game. The game itself ended up being above average, getting a lot of mixed reviews, scoring many 6s out of 10s. Cameron Lewis from Official Xbox Magazine gave it an average score of 5.0. Today, though, it's delisted. You can still search for a match, but I believe this is just for LAN play. You can kill a few bots, but as soon as you die once, the match is over. You can die with only a handful of bullets, and weapons are super accurate. Giving this game a rating is pointless. You can't play it anymore. Blacklight Tango Down was successful, selling almost 50,000 units in its first week, and 6 months later it moved 127,000 copies, pulling in nearly $2 million in sales. The sequel was much better, Blacklight Retribution, which was a free-to-play FPS that started on the PC and was later ported over to the PlayStation 4. Xbox never got a version. Developers Zombie Studios, who with a name like Zombie Studios, didn't make as many zombie games as you might think. They will end up showing up later on our list, and we will finally find out exactly how many zombie games they made when we get to the H's.
This is called foreshadowing. Foreshadowing happens when clues in a story hint at future events.
Blade Kitten. This is a 2.5D action platformer developed by Chrome Studios. Now, hold on. I know that these are the guys behind the game room. We will get there. Oh, don't you worry. We got to get through 2 more games of theirs before we cover that one, so let's keep going. Blade Kitten is based off the webcomic of the same name about a female half-human, half-cat bounty hunter named Kit Ballard. The game was created by Chrome Studios creative director Steve Stamatatis. I hope I got that right. I don't like it. The voice acting is basic and the dialogue is cliche and very bland. For being based on a comic book, I expected more story, but they just throw you into this world. You're a bounty hunter and you accept a bounty for a person known as the leader of the squad of troublemakers. Not kidding, that's how it's explained. Everything is done with the seriousness of a Saturday morning cartoon.
Aw, shucks. Are you trying to scare me or something? 'Cause you really suck at it. Okay.
Kit seems like a fairly generic female character from the early 2000s, pink hair, feisty personality, and she has to say something different every time I pick up a chest.
Ding! Bonus. Win, get grats.
What does that even mean? Her weapon is a sword that floats behind you, and when she moves her arm, it kind of magically swings out. Why does it work like this? It's very awkward and doesn't feel responsive, and sometimes it seems like button presses don't register. The gameplay is relatively standard for a 2.5D action game. There are times when you don't know where to go or your path is blocked. The level design feels like I'm just wasting my time. I'm playing the trial and I don't know if it skipped the opening cutscene or the first few levels to get me into the gameplay faster, but the way it's presented is kind of abrupt. Blade Kitten was a rather average game for its time. Aside from Eurogamer's 8 out of 10, most reviews gave this a 5 out of 10. The Metacritic is nearly the same for PlayStation 3 and the 360, a 58 out of 100. I give it a 4 out of 10. It becomes repetitive very fast, and the story is complete nonsense. It is only $5, so I might pick it up before the store closes to give it more of a fair review, but I can't recommend it as is. This game was also only Episode 1. That's right, Blade Kitten was episodic. Episode 2 was released as DLC 5 years later in March of 2015, but only on Steam. The consoles never saw the DLC.
It's only a girl!
It's only a girl? Only a girl? Who wrote this junk? I've killed 20 men in armored suits by this point in the game. Blazing Birds. With a name like Blazing Birds, you might think this is going to be an exciting World War II fighter plane simulation. Nope, the description says, compete in a sport of robotic badminton in Blazing Birds. What? Did I stutter? You're playing badminton with robots. That's the game. This should be a $1 phone game. Choose a country and get ready to take on 30-something other countries in a row. Get ready to destroy your opponent. No, I mean it, you're both robots. You literally destroy them at the end of the match. It's rather simple controls and there are some power-ups. There's just not much to it. 3 out of 10. I know it was largely designed by one guy and it looks a bit frantic at times and it has flashy power-ups, but the 2D gameplay just doesn't give you much room to try any strategy. Use a drop shot if the AI is too far back and spike it over their head if they come too close. Next. Bliss Island. This is a pick-up-and-play game in which you delve into the world of animal creatures and help Hoshi win a day off as you take on over 25 unique challenges. Yep, this is a minigame compilation. Things do keep changing from level to level, but many minigames are too simple to offer any skill. Even in 2008, this was considered average at best. It's below average now, 4 out of 10. This has been delisted anyway. If this game shows up on other platforms, at least you know now what to expect. Blood Knights. Blood Knights is an action role-playing game developed by German studio Deck 13 Interactive and published by Calypso Media, also from Germany. Humans and vampires are at war. It's a tale old as time. You play as the captain of the Holy Order that fights vampires, called, Jeremy. Really? That's the best you could come up with?
Jeremy! You must be out of your mind!
Captain of the Holy Order of Vampire Slayers, Jeremy, just Jeremy.
No time for talking.
Travels to a set of ruins to protect the Blood Seal, a powerful artifact. Vampires attack and the Order suffers heavy losses. In desperation, the priest, Bartholomew, uses a ritual to bind Jeremy to the vampire Alyssa. Damn, look at those yowzers. Bond me to her. I want to take her to Red Lobster. So everything works out. No. Captain of the Holy Order of Vampire Slayers, Jeremy, just Jeremy, is turned into a vampire, and the vampires get the seal you were trying to protect anyway. And guess what? It turns out the Order has reservations about their Captain of the Holy Order of Vampire Slayers becoming a vampire himself. Who knew?
Oh, Jeremy. Father, enough. This is not our captain anymore. Stop talking to the creature he has become.
Players assume the role of Jeremy, a sword-wielding, melee-focused character, and they can switch to Alyssa at any time, who uses ranged attacks only in a way of dual crossbows. The game isn't too hard, with frequent save points for the most part. As long as you remember to drain the blood from your weakened enemies by holding left trigger, your health should be fine.
What's your name, by the way?
Eliza.
What? Eliza? It's not pronounced Alyssa? Since when does Alyssa spelled with only one S become Eliza? I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Oh well, too late to change it now. Back to the review. The game is also very ambitious. You have cutscenes using 3D models of the characters, voice acting, and even some lip syncing. Certain NPCs have dialogue and you even have multiple choices. Sometimes you just ask all the questions, but they do include some smart-ass answers. Later on, you take down a lady vampire, and while she is being prepared to be burned alive at the stake, she asks you to let her go. I needed to make a copy of my save before I tried this, but this is kinda awesome.
Please,
I can't bear this. Jeremy, have mercy.
You know, as much as I was making fun of this game in its opening, I actually started to kind of like it. The game even features both single-player and local co-op, with each player controlling one of the characters. This explains why they throw so many enemies at you at once, so it might be worth trying with a friend sometime. Blood Knights received generally unfavorable reviews upon release, with many critics faulting the game for showing a lack of creativity or boring gameplay. Metacritic gave the Xbox 360 version an average score of 43 out of 100, with the user score a little higher. I liked a few things about this game, but it's still only average at best. 5 out of 10. It should deserve a 4, but I had a few laughs at the dialogue, and I got it for only a few dollars, so I got my money's worth. If it seems vaguely interesting, it is backwards compatible, so even after the Xbox 360 store closes, you can find it on newer Xbox consoles.
But you are going to get us killed. Again.
Oh my god, that is a massive rack. You could probably milk those dairy pillows for a week.
Gonna take you to a lobster. Gonna take you to Red Lobster. Okay, baby. Big old tits.
Thanks once again, Mark. Always great to hear your voice. Check out Mark's website on YouTube for even more music. Blood of the Werewolf. This was another one of those games to be delisted on the February 7th, 2023 Xbox 360 Marketplace update. If it seemed like it could be a promising game, then I would end up buying it and play it some more in order to give it a fair review. But as you can see, Blood of the Werewolf really isn't the type of game I needed to buy. The controls are very stiff and require way too much trial and error. The werewolf feels awkward to move, platforms are constantly falling away as you touch them, dropping into damaging red liquid, I guess? Then there are sections where you play as Selena in female form, because that's how modern day werewolves work. They can change whenever they want. No moon needed. She also doesn't move well and has a crummy crossbow. This flame room is trying to tell you to crouch, but it's designed so that every time you need to jump, you might get hit from above. It's annoying. Look at this! Flames everywhere, plus little additional fireballs! Back in 2014, these types of difficult platformers for the sake of being difficult were more popular, but 10 years later, I find them more annoying than challenging. This is a 3 out of 10. Back then, it got mostly average reviews, but it hasn't aged well. There are a number of better platformers on the 360. Bloodforge. This is a hack-and-slash action game developed by Climax Studios. The art style is alright, and the gameplay consists of hacking away at enemies, staggering them, and then performing a gruesome finishing move. Defeat opponents to earn more blood, which can be used as in-game currency. The camera is a little off, but the main issue is that it just gets so tedious after a while. Don't expect many checkpoints. Critical reception toward the game was generally unfavorable. Bloodforge has a Metacritic rating of only 42 out of 100. With a large number of negative reviews, this is a 3 out of 10 for me. It's very uninteresting in both gameplay and story. Blood Rain Betrayal. Another side-scrolling hack-and-slash platformer, but this one is developed by WayForward Technologies. You'll be jumping from platform to platform, avoiding spikes, and you might need to memorize some enemy placement to some degree. This was not an easy game upon release. Some found it challenging, but many others saw it as frustrating. The PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions received average reviews back then. At the time, Jim Sterling, who was a reviews editor for Destructoid, went so far as to putting it on their top 10 worst games of 2011 for its terrible controls and handling and obscene number of enemies thrown at the player. Sadly, this game has been delisted for several years, but I did download the free trial when it was available. I played it. It was hard. But a little over 10 years later, WayForward Technologies released a newly remastered version called Blood Rain Betrayal Fresh Bites. This version has updated 4K visuals, redone audio, improved difficulty and balance, and is now fully voiced with Laura Bailey and Troy Baker, reprising their roles as Rain and Kagan from before, but with more added voice actors to round out the experience. You can still play this game on the original difficulty, but I chose to play the new rebalanced version. The combat, enemies, and the gameplay looks nearly identical to the original. Those little frog-like enemies can still destroy you, but they don't seem to attack in the large numbers that they did before. There are more lines of spoken dialogue now, but it starts out very sparse. So don't expect all new cutscenes or lots of talking in between every mission. The gameplay feels better, still lots of blood, and you need to move fast. I don't like how the platforming needs to be so precise sometimes, though. Metacritic doesn't have many reviews for this version of the game, and most platforms don't even have a rating. For me, it's a 6 out of 10, above average. You can still find this version for about $5 US on sale, but the 360 and the PlayStation 3 versions were delisted a while back, so the Fresh Bites version is your only option on console. Bloody Good Time. This is a game that unfortunately had no chance when it originally released. Its name is extremely generic. The cover looks like it could be used for a variety of different games. I mean, look at this. Is it a zombie game, a platformer, a fighting game? And it seemingly had no marketing, and streaming on Twitch wasn't even a thing at this time. And that's a shame. This game is actually a spiritual sequel to The Ship, which started life as a free mod for Half-Life, released in 2004. And it's the debut title from developer Outer Light, when they released a standalone version in 2006. I remember watching people play this game on YouTube videos, and I always wanted it to come to consoles. Bloody Good Time was essentially made for me, but I had no idea what this game was until I looked at it for this video, which was 13 years later. So what happened? Well, it plays rough, and the mechanics are not explained very well. Bloody Good Time takes place in a Hollywood movie set, and it features 3 different maps, a beach, casino, and horror house. Players have 8 available B-movie characters that are your standard cliches, like the surfer, the goth, the showgirl, the clown, the bunny girl, the beach babe, the gambler, and the stoner. This game does have a how to play section in the menus, but it's just 11 pages of text descriptions with some images to help, but it really doesn't ease the player into how things work. I mean, I knew this was based on The Ship going in, so I understood the basics about killing your target, making sure that you're not seen on camera or by the police, and you need to eat, sleep, and poop. But can you imagine trying to convey all this to a brand new player? Nowadays, I don't feel that this would be a problem, especially since all it would take is for some people watching a few popular streamers having a good time to get them interested in the game as well. You have odd names for things that don't seem to help either. In my first match in the trial, they added the infection modifier to the standard hunt mode, and it was only a matter of 2 minutes into the game. Imagine trying to learn the map, and suddenly I have no target and my screen is covered in this green hurting effect, and I don't know what's going on. I hate it. I don't understand what I need to do, and as soon as it wears off, another AI bot comes over and infects me again. This isn't fun, and I literally almost quit the game right here. I don't like this modifier when I'm trying to learn the basic rules. This game is unfortunate. It took me a good 15 minutes or more before I started getting into the game, getting kills, and having some fun. There are traps and insta-kills that you can activate, not to mention humiliations when you kill a prey or target. Moving around felt slow, and I could not change the turning speed or reticle movement at all. You just can't react to a sound that's behind you quick enough, which is frustrating when other players are hunting you down constantly. Using items is clunky, and the weapons can be hard to aim. It's still available until the 360 store closes. It's only $5, and it's rather enjoyable to play with some like-minded players if you can get them together in a match. There's only 3 maps, but it does support up to a max of 8 players, and you can have bots in there as well. On 360, it's a 5 out of 10. It can be fun, but it is hard to get into and the controls need some work. It's only an average experience today. Mitch Dyer from Official Xbox Magazine gave it a 5.5 and liked the goofy humor, but felt there were intrusions that got in the way of the fun. On PC, the scores are a bit higher and you can probably turn around faster, so try that version if it sounds good to you. The Bluecoats, North vs. South. Developed and published by Infogrames, North and South is a strategy game released in 1989 for the Amiga and Atari ST. It was then ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System, among many other platforms of the day. The Bluecoats, North vs. South is a remastered version of the game that was released back in 2012 for Windows, iOS, and Android. This is the version that was turned into what you see here for the XBLA service. It was made by Microids, which is the adventure game label for the company called Anomaly Interactive. If you don't remember this game being on the 360 storefront, don't feel bad. It wasn't released until September of 2016. The game is a very basic strategy game where two teams capture territories on a map, and there are 3 different mini-games depending on what you're attacking. Whenever you fight another army on the map, you go to a single-screen battlefield where you must switch between controlling cannons, troops, or cavalry. Each control is different and both sides are attacking in real time. This feels cumbersome and it's difficult because you can only control one at a time. But you need to decide on a strategy to win because you'll lose every game if you don't figure out this battlefield minigame. Then you have Fort Capture, a single-screen shootout where you must pop out from behind cover and push the right corresponding button to take out the other team. This game is also kind of hard because even if you take out a number of troops, more keep coming back, and they all jump up at different times. And they can knock out your hearts fast. I thought I figured out a good method, but I lost this minigame every time. Train robbery wasn't available in the trial, so I can't show it to you. When you win or lose, all you get is a simple end screen with some text. Playing against another player might be more enjoyable, but the gameplay is rather simple and boring. 3 out of 10. There seems to be only one map layout, so your strategy will end up being the same once you find one that works. And in the spirit of being thorough, you might recognize that there's a newer version that came out in 2020. Microids would make another remake, the Bluecoats North and South, which released first for Nintendo Switch, but the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One also saw versions. So what's the difference? Well, the Bluecoats North vs. South on the Xbox 360 is $10 and developed by Microids. The Bluecoats North and South 2020 is $30 and developed by Appeal Studios, even though Microids still published it. I bought this newer one on a good sale. I figured it would have more content or more additional features, but I was wrong. This is almost closer to being a remaster because they just updated the visuals, and aside from changing how the 2 minigames play, it's exactly the same game underneath as the one from 1989. There's still only one map, and there's no additional content or gameplay elements. The map and the battles play out exactly the same way as they did in the original. The side-scrolling segments are now both done in first person. On train robbery, you win by getting to the front of the train. On Fort Capture, you win by eliminating the other team. There were only a few pickups like ammo and health, and the AI is so bad that I can win this one every time. This plays way better than the 360 version, but there's no challenge without another player to shoot back. This version gets a 4 out of 10. Even with 2 players, the gameplay is so limited that both of you will probably tire of it pretty quickly. It needs more options, and the battlefield segment is just a rush to the cannons. I can't recommend this version either. Bomberman Live. Bomberman Live is one of the greatest games to come to the Xbox Live Arcade. In 2007, it was the perfect modern version of Bomberman, with customization, online multiplayer, and plenty of content for a $10 price. This game was popular in the early days of XBLA, with 1 million in sales by April of 2012. I only give this game a 5 out of 10. Bomberman Live Battlefest plays the same, but it has more content and it's backwards compatible. The original Bomberman Live is not, so I can't recommend this version, so don't feel bad if you don't get a chance to get it before the 360 store closes. We also have one of the featured characters on the image for my YouTube channel homepage. I made a video called Can You Identify These Video Game Characters? The Game Challenge, where I asked the community to help me identify all the characters on these 2 images. The response was great, and I still encourage you to help me out by visiting this video. Both lists are still not solved at the moment. the one image I use on my channel, and I am crossing off each one of these characters as I play a game that features them, with the overall goal to cross out everyone over the course of several years. We are marking off Bomberman in this case, located right here, since I played Bomberman Live. Bomberman also shows up on the other image, the one I call the Bowser Center image, which is my backup pick for my channel when I finish the first one. I am marking off any characters that show up on both of these images, but I might not always mention each one in these videos, for the video would just end up being longer than it needs to be. Just know that the games played for these XBLA videos will count for both images, so you might see a little animation once in a while that crosses off a certain character. So now you know why that animation might show up. Moving on. Bomberman Live Battle Fest. The sequel to the immensely popular Bomberman Live, but now you have more power-ups, more modes, more maps, more costumes, more everything. Besides more content, the one big addition is the fan-requested Teams mode. The team play by itself is possibly worth the $10 price, but with more content and sharper visuals, this is a must-buy if you didn't get the original. The classic Bomberman gameplay is still there, and you can play with a variety of different options and tailor them to your liking. And you can play with your Xbox Live avatar, so what's not to love? It's still a good game to date, 7 out of 10. It's a better game than the original Bomberman Live in every way. The only downside is that this is a strictly multiplayer game. There's no progression or single-player element to it. It's just one multiplayer match after another. Why does it look like I'm jerking off two imaginary dicks? Boogie Bunnies. Help the Boogie Bunnies achieve their dream of stardom as they shimmy and shake their way through exotic, colorful destinations all the way to Hollywood. This is another Match 3 puzzle game, oh boy! But Boogie Bunnies lets you match up bunnies from 3 different sides, left, right, and from the bottom. The bunnies are a little charming and you can score chain combinations and watch them dance. 4 out of 10. It's a decent game for $5, but there's better competition out there. The gameplay is very repetitive, and there's not much that's gonna interest you as you keep playing. Boom Boom Rocket. In the game, players trigger rockets to the beat of the music while a camera moves through a 3D cityscape. The better you time the explosions, the more spectacular the fireworks effects are. I can only select one song in the trial, but I did listen to the other songs. The music isn't bad and will give you some challenge. This game was very popular around 2007 when it came out, selling 580,000 copies by 2009, but today, it just seems like an average rhythm game that uses fireworks to make the gameplay more spectacular than it really is. 5 out of 10. Boom Boom Rocket was more novel when it released, but today it's average at best. I don't think you're missing much if the 360 store closes before you get a chance to buy it, but maybe download the trial and see for yourself. Braid. Braid is a puzzle platformer originally first launched on XBLA, but it would go on to be ported to all modern consoles, PC, Mac, Linux, and more. Designed by Jonathan Blow, it's often seen as a huge step for indie game development, and its production was documented in the 2012 film Indie Game: The Movie. It has seen critical acclaim and won several awards in game design. The artwork is simple with its own original style that must have taken some time to design. Each world gives you a different power to affect the way time behaves, so it's fun seeing how each one creates its own unique puzzles. The trial does a good job in giving you a sample from several different areas, instead of just showing you only one type. Braid will introduce you to a concept and then it lets you figure out the rest. A great game, 8 out of 10. It can be frustrating at times, requiring some finesse to get just the right outcome, but it feels rewarding when you figure it out. Nearly every puzzle shows you something new and it interjects that into the world later. Impeccably designed. You can find this on many different platforms. Brain Challenge. Get your brain into shape with fun daily exercises. Brain Challenge is part of a sizable boom of brain games that came out on phones and the handheld systems of the day, like the DS and the PS Vita. This game is supposedly designed to train all areas of your brain, like they all say. 20 different games in 5 different categories: memory, visual, logic, math, and focus. Keep track of your progress every day. It's a 4 out of 10. It's just a series of mini games that records your overall performance with detailed stats and graphs, hoping you'll want to come back to improve. I really don't believe determining which ball bounces higher will increase your IQ, but it can give you something to do in short bursts. Cameron Lewis from official Xbox Magazine scored it a 5.0 and said there's not much reason to keep coming back. Breach. Breach is a team-based first-person shooter developed by Atomic Games. It had 6-on-6 multiplayer across 4 game modes and 5 maps. It came out on January of 2011, and it was delisted on Steam by August of the same year. Surprisingly, this wasn't because of sales, at least not directly. The game was delisted after Destineer, a company who had acquired Atomic Games, ceased operation in May of 2011. On Xbox 360, it was delisted 4 years later, in February of 2015. Atomic Games were the ones originally developing the controversial and unreleased at the time 6 Days in Fallujah. But Konami backed out as the publisher, and when Destineer closed, it put everything on hold. My footage for Breach is limited. I re-downloaded the trial, but obviously I couldn't join any online matches. Yep, this is what online multiplayer looked like in 2011. 720p, jaggies everywhere, low detailed environments, but the weapon models look good. It did score a lot of 5s and 6s, as you can see here, except for good old official Xbox Magazine that gave it a staggering 8 out of 10. Reviewer Cameron Lewis seemed to be impressed by this $15 game. It's hard to believe that free-to-play games today have such better mechanics and control than a budget shooter like this back in 2011. Well, mark this one off the list. Let's move on. The Bridge. This game is a 2D logic puzzle game that has showed up on many platforms over the years. Even the Switch got it in 2017. I've heard it explained like Isaac Newton meets MC Escher, and it's pretty close to that. You manipulate gravity as you move through the impossible architectures. It seems to have benefited from being designed by largely 2 people, even though the music was done by another individual. The beautiful hand-drawn art is done in the style of a black and white lithograph. It starts out relatively easy, but it can become frustrating. You will constantly die, but you can rewind time, so the game gives you a chance to figure things out. It can seem impossible, but it is so rewarding to figure it out for yourself. I'm purposely trying to show you several different puzzles, but I'm trying to not spoil them for you too much. 7 out of 10. The Bridge is one of the better 2D puzzle games on the 360. It's not backwards compatible, but you can find it on other platforms. This footage is from the Xbox One version because I caught it on a good sale. It's literally the same game. You might be able to find it drop to $1.50 maybe once a year if you watch for good sales. Oh damn, a classic shake at Sonic for $1.99? Is this a current ad? Is this going on right now? Who am I talking to? I live alone. I bet there's a good chance this sale could be still going on. Maybe I should just get in my car and take off. All right, I'll do that. Once again, I live alone, so I have no one else to talk to and no one is here to listen to me. I'm just gonna go do it. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. This is a fun little adventure game developed by Starbreeze Studios and published by 505 Games. This is a rather simple adventure game that has the unique mechanic of controlling 2 brothers at the same time to complete various puzzles. Each analog stick controls one of the brothers. You need to move both brothers around to perform different functions, like using the small brother to get under a fence so he can unlock a door or gate so that the other can get in. This game is highly praised across all platforms, like this review from the Xbox 360, the official Xbox Magazine. Wow, I guess you just can't go wrong with not saying Xbox enough times. Good visuals, a good story, interesting locations, and a fantastic world to explore. 8 out of 10. Great game. It has locations and moments that you will remember for years. It goes on sale quite often, so grab it when it does. It sold 800,000 copies by 2015. I actually made an achievement guide for the game many years back. Bobble Neo. The action game classic Bubble Bobble returns as an Xbox Live arcade game in Bobble Neo. You have a full-on recreation of the original arcade version of the game with 100 rounds. This is still a fun game that you can play alone or in offline co-op for up to 4 players. The updated visuals are decent. The use of 3D character models always looks weird, but there's no gameplay improvements, and you'll still run into glitches. Arrange mode gives you some new levels and obstacles and also is playable up to 4 players. The game can still be very challenging, but it's also addictive. I can only give it a 6 out of 10. I don't know if I can recommend this for $10, so maybe check out the trial before all games end up getting delisted later in 2024. Buku Sudoku. Experience the excitement of the world's hottest number game sensation. Buku Sudoku takes the pen and paper puzzler and gives you several options. Yippee! Unfortunately, one of those options doesn't help me seem to like Sudoku anymore. Now, I never got into this game, but you can see from my footage, I gave it my utmost attention and gave its addictive gameplay a fair shot. There are tutorials, several game modes, multiple grid sizes, and the option to display hints, highlight errors, undo moves, and even solve puzzles. But it's a 5 out of 10 for me. Even I know that it doesn't make much sense paying $10 for a game that you can find for free elsewhere relatively easy. Online play is the only advantage of this package. But since the game is delisted, I'm not sure if that's even still possible. Burger Time World Tour. This game is a return of the classic arcade platformer game in the Burger Time series, developed by Frozen Codebase. Have you ever wondered what a brand new modern-day Burger Time game would be like? Well, stop wondering because it would suck. Burger Time was one of those classic single-screen arcade games where you could see all the enemies on the board and all the burger parts that you needed to walk across. Your goals remain the same in World Tour, but the developer has engineered these complex cylindrical levels that rotate as you move around them. This looks interesting at first, but then you realize that the art style and the colors used are garbage. It's hard to tell your character apart from the enemies, the burgers, and the backgrounds. They just kind of all blend together. And I've heard that some gamers complain about headaches from trying to follow the character around. It's a confusing mess, honestly. Enemies can also spawn right on top of you, which is just lazy programming. The Metacritic score is a 55 on Xbox, a 50 on PlayStation 3, and on the Wii it's a dismal 30. On April 30th of 2014, the game was delisted from the Xbox Live and WiiWare digital storefronts. You might be able to find a physical copy on PlayStation 3, but I don't see the point. Cameron Lewis from Official Xbox Magazine scored it a 4.5 and mentions that while they tried to add new elements, they end up damaging the overall gameplay. I give it a 4 out of 10. It has not aged well. It actually hurts my eyes trying to focus on where I'm at and where I need to go when you play for a while. I remember thinking that an all-new Burger Time game would be kind of fun, and then I played this demo, and then I shut my dumb mouth. Burnout Crash. When it was first announced, I was disappointed. This featured a top-down perspective, but once I played it, I found it a good experience. The whole idea is designed around the crash mode found in other Burnout games. You initiate a crash by driving into an intersection, and after you have caused enough wrecks, a meter builds up and you can explode, which lets you launch yourself into another direction so you can do more damage. Activate score multipliers and rack up as much property damage as you can. When you fill up the crash meter, you have set events that get triggered on certain intersections. Like a bank truck will show up, take it out, and collect the money. And the game is constantly hitting you with voice samples, sound effects, and short music clips when certain events are happening, which is very helpful with all the carnage going on. Like when the bank truck appears, you hear, "Hey Big Spender." When the bulldozer is activated, it plays "Push It" by Salt and Peppa.
push it real good.
Or you may activate a blizzard and you'll hear a sample of Ice Ice Baby in the background. And when the thunderstorm is coming, you hear... Several of these will put a smile on your face. As you progress, you will unlock additional events, new vehicles, and new intersections. It's still fun and very addictive all these years later. It's limited to how much content is here, but it's an enjoyable time for what it has. 6 out of 10, and for some reason Matt McMuscles does a voice in certain intersections? Matt is from the old days of Machinima and the Super Best Friends play, and you might even know him from his more recent work on What Happened. It's weird he's in here, right? I mean, that's gotta be his voice. And that is the end of part 1. Thank you so much for watching. This was an epic undertaking, culminating in over a year's worth of work. I know, the video is long. I kept cutting content until I got to a point where I just didn't want to strip out anything else. I think the level of quality was worth the effort, but let me know in the comments what you think. This might be too long for many, but look at this as a time capsule for the XBLA service. Nobody else on YouTube has a video or series that goes this in-depth with nearly every XBLA game. And I also wanted this to be a love letter to the XBLA service and how awesome it was for me at the time. It's going to take some time to go through and discuss all 600 plus some games, but I'm going to do my best to get out as many parts before the 360 store closes by July 29th of 2024. Videos will be labeled in parts, but also by what letters will be covered, like part 2 will cover C through D. We got a lot of games to still go through, so let me get back to work. Are you wondering when the next part will be released? The next video in the series will show up on the upper left of the screen when it becomes available. You can check out the full playlist for the entire series on the lower right, which will also include audio commentaries at a later date. And you can always go to my channel and check out for the recent videos to see if a new episode has shown up. Thanks for watching.